All right. I'd like to call this meeting of Strategic Priorities Committee to order, March 18th, 2025, at Council Chambers, the Town of St. Mary's. We are broadcasting live on the Town of St. Mary's YouTube channel. The Council for the Town of St. Mary's acknowledges with gratitude and respect that we are gathering on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse, giving thanks for all creation. I'll begin this meeting by asking for declarations of pecuniary interest, starting with Councillor Craigmile.
None.
Councillor Edney.
None.
Councillor Luna.
None.
Councillor Lucas.
None.
Councillor Pridham.
None.
And I have none. The agenda was circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or additions with the agenda? Councillor Edney.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So within Ms. Brainham's report, there's mention of an individual, and it's not in camera, and we have to make a decision about something. It's implied that the decision is already made within the report, but it's not, and I don't think it's fair that that is brought up here in council. Actually, I think it's wrong. We'll have to ask the clerk if that's correct or not.
So if you wish to go into closed session to make a decision, you certainly may. You can do that at the beginning. You can ask partway through. Councillor Edney, I don't want to presuppose what point you're speaking to. So if you have a certain point that you would like to, then if you make that motion to go into closed session about an identifiable individual, we can then move through that process, and then you can share your comments then if you'd like.
Thank you. It has to do with naming rights, and I don't also see something from our commemoration policy to explain where that stands as well.
Yeah, so through your worship, I would say they're separate and distinct. So the commemoration policy wouldn't touch on this at all. I think today, my key message for today is council back out of the minutia, okay? Everything we're talking about today is conceptual level only. So even on Station Gallery, and then you'll hear me reiterate this probably multiple times on the downtown service location review, stay at 50,000 foot level, stay conceptual, just give us guidance on the models that you want to see move forward, and understand that the specifics and the very specific day-to-day operating things and the next steps are truly next steps and things that we have to figure out after you give us guidance today. But I would just say, again, I would caution everybody, and I know I'm going to say it multiple times during my report because I had to do it with my committee, is stay out of the day-to-day. We're not at day-to-day. We're at 50,000 foot level kind of conversation today, which is appropriate for strategic priorities. So for the Station Gallery, I think what Angela has done is she has presented to you several models of how we could move forward with a gallery in the town of St. Mary's. I think 4 separate options. We're not here today asking for anybody to make decisions on naming rights, funding galas, or anything like that. Okay, we just want to understand which model you'd like to see go forward, if any.
All right, anything else? All right. With that, I will seek a motion that the agenda be approved as presented. Is somebody willing to move that motion? Councillor Craigmile, second. Councillor Luna. Any further discussion? All in favor? So carried. Seems we have no delegations presentations. We'll move on to the strategic priorities review. First to be 5.1 COR 14-2025, the Station Gallery feasibility review. We have Angela Braham here today along with Mr. Morin. So take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So actually, I'll start off just based on Councillor Edney's comment. You'll see in my report the recommendation today is to continue status quo, and we received this report. You'll hear from Angela today on some of her findings as we went through, but our direction is that we continue to work with Station Gallery as is status quo over the next year and a bit, and start to analyze again how that's working. We've also made a recommendation to implement some other programming and educational programming at the train station now, which you'll see and you'll hear as part of the downtown service delivery review. There are some connections to that, to the what 14 Church could be, and this will give us some stats and some information whether or not that is a true need for the community as we go forward. So as our CIO mentioned, today is really about, we're putting all of this information in front of you today so we can start that discussion, and then again we refine our reviews. We've got in here to continue to work with Angela to refine some of those options as we move forward, as we hear the discussion on both sites fundamentally. So I won't take up a lot of time in my report. I do want to kind of just give you, again, just talk about the background a little bit. We started down this road when, again, us having discussions with Mr. Porteous about what's going to happen with the Station Gallery as he kind of sets his path in the future. And at the time, we weren't sure if we were going to be successful in finding somebody else to take over for that. So what would we do if there was a position where Cameron wasn't going to be running the Station Gallery anymore? What position would we be? What would we do as a town? Do we continue to support? Do we not support? Do we put out an RFP for somebody else? Do you take it in-house? We weren't sure, and that's when we engaged Angela to kind of help with that feasibility study of, okay, what would this look like as a third party? Have some conversations with the town folks, with a lot of our stakeholders, and take a look at what opportunity exists or what opportunities do not exist, and what would we do as a town to move things forward. And that's kind of what she's presenting you today, is her findings of the feasibility of a gallery or gallery-type activities in St. Mary's, what that might look like for the future, and some options for us to consider as we move forward. So that's, I won't go into any more details in my report because I think it's important for you to hear what Angela says. It is, as she mentioned earlier, it's a lengthy report, but I've asked her to put it, summarize it in an executive summary. So the PowerPoint presentation is really that executive summary. And I'll let Angela kind of speak to that a little bit more, and then we'll be ready to answer any questions that Council may have from there.
Councilor Luna has a question. Quick.
Yes, just for my own clarification before we get into all of this, but in the recommendation, it says that we're to implement their new business plan for the remainder of 2025 and early into 2026. Is this committing us, if we pass this motion, is this committing us to the community grant of $10,000? Or what is the purpose of saying early 2026? Just so moving forward, I can have that clarified.
Thank you. Through the mayor. The reason that I stated early 2026 there is what happens is the community grant process will continue. It's an annual review of that grant. Again, one of the things we want to talk about with the community grant committee is moving that forward a little bit. But at this point in time, typically what happens is we approve community grants in this case, we'd approve them in early 2026. And that's why I put early 2026. Just like this year, we approved the grants in January. That would be similarly in 2026 and in give or take January. So to give some time to whatever decisions of council are made to unwind or make changes to that.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. So I presented a pretty lengthy report and PowerPoint. So I'm not going to go through every single slide because I think you've all had time to see it, and otherwise I'm going to take all the time, and really I want to hear back your feedback. You all know what the mission and the mandate of the organization is. I've given you a little bit of history and operational overview. I think the one thing I didn't include here, which I think is important for you to know, is that they've started operating classes. I mean, I alluded to that in January. Duncan started operating classes. To date, he's had 27 individual students, revenue of $4,020, and operated 6 separate sessions of classes that are running anywhere from 4 to kind of indefinitely on an ongoing basis once a week until whenever. So I mean, it is a program that, despite the fact that they haven't had the opportunity to advertise it very well, is basically being word of mouth. I think it does show that there is interest for classes and some sort of earned revenue stream through that. So having been granted the use of the extra space on the north end is paying off for them to date, because they have been making use of it, and they are operating classes, and it continues to grow, and he continues to get more students as it sort of goes. So I think that's an important thing to ad, so that'll definitely improve their financial situation if it's ongoing. And I think, as you saw in my proposed budget for 2025 or the sort of proposed budget going forward, I did put a substantial amount of money, substantial line item in there for education programs to help offset the costs of running the institution. So I'm not going to, unless there's questions on the, and I think probably the best way to do this is if there's questions that come up as we go, like, please ask them rather than waiting until the end of the presentation. So if you've got any questions about the sort of operations, I think that the one thing I want to say is, having worked as a gallery director, curator for most of my career, for a small institution like this with minimal budget, I think we do have to recognize how well they're actually doing. 1,600 visitors a year that are actual guest book signatures is pretty good, because I think you can safely double that, because a lot of people don't sign. I know, even though I know how important it is, I tend to be a person that forgets to sign guest books when I go visit galleries, and I should know better. So if I'm not doing it, it means a lot of other people aren't doing it either. Usually one person per party signs, so if you're a group of 2 or 4, one person, not 4 people, are going to sign it. And then there's all the people that are visiting the station, going to and from the train or waiting for people, tend to not sign because that's not their main purpose. So, and they're still eyeballs on the artwork for the most case. So I think it's been documented that most of the people that are operating the station for the visitors do turn on the lights and do make it accessible to the public. So they're actually, the value that we're giving to the community for this little gallery that was started with basically nothing is pretty impressive. And then also I think that their visitation, 15 to 45% of the gallery visitors, depending on the exhibition, are coming from St. Mary's. 20% of the galleries is coming from London, Middlesex County. Interestingly, Stratford is less than London and Middlesex counties. So I think that's also a growth area, because I think if there's a way to promote the gallery more in the Stratford area, that would definitely increase attendance, because we're getting a lot of visitors to Stratford, but for some reason they don't know to come down here. So I think that's a real growth area. Again, they've done 56 exhibitions in the 9 years, supporting 200 local and regional visual artists, which is pretty impressive. You're making a real impact into the arts community in here, and I think the school program that they're operating is amazing. Like, getting kids involved is the future of the arts. If you can get them involved at a young age, not only are you getting the kids interested, but then their families and friends and neighbors and aunts and uncles and the whole thing are coming. I did over 20 stakeholder interviews with a variety of people around town, including all of you, city staff or town staff, and various people that are engaged with arts and culture in our community. The 6 main themes that emerged are that, and I think the most interesting one, as I was just saying to your deputy mayor, is that arts and culture is essential to St. Mary's identity. The one thing that came up in almost all the interviews, unprovoked, I didn't ask the question, was how important arts and culture is to this community, and how this is a draw for arts-related businesses, culture-related businesses. People really believe that arts and culture is important, and a lot of the interviewers thought that it should be kind of one of the defining features of how we market downtown, how we market St. Mary's, and arts. And if we promote that as an identity, it encourages other people that are interested in that to come to town and support other things. And I think there's, whether you sort of believe in Richard Florida's work or not, I think there's a number of other researchers that have shown that arts and culture is a way to improve economic development and get downtowns viable and successful. People really are proud of the historical and architectural significance of St. Mary's in general, and how important that is, but also the history and architectural significance of the Via Station, and they love the fact that it is being used by something that has a public use, that people can go to, and that it's being preserved through public engagement. Again, these were conversational, open-ended interviews, so I didn't have a lot of guiding questions. I let people kind of take the conversations where they wanted to. So there's also a lot of appreciation for the work Cameron's done. The fact that he has chosen this community as his home, that he's taken the initiative to start a art gallery as, you know, kind of a passion project that also has benefited the community and the arts and the culture in this area, is definitely not missed by people in this community. Gallery location was discussed in a lot of ways, whether it was through it's a good or bad location, but the location was a topic of conversation. Some people thought it was really great use of the station. There was a lot of comment about the fact that it's difficult to find, it's not suitable for an art gallery, it's, you know, it has parking issues, there's all kinds of issues. And a lot of it was along that level of, it works now, but is it something that we can use for the future? Or does allow a gallery to grow? There was a lot of discussion about new vision for the gallery, that people think that the gallery has been great the way it is, but it needs a refresh. It needs to sort of move to a next stage. Keeping it just as it is, sort of the status quo, is not particularly what anybody wants to see ideally. They think that it's got a good foundation, but it needs a new direction to make it sort of grow. And then the other thing that came up, which was really interesting, I know I'm jumping all over the place and you're trying to keep up, is the arts and culture partnerships. So one of the things that came up from a really unlikely interviewee, actually, somebody that's not engaged with the arts at all, really, is that what we need in town is an arts council, something similar to a BIA, but for the arts, that brings all these disparate elements of the arts together. So you've got, you know, all the creative businesses downtown, you've got the arts organizations ranging from, you know, community players, the Station Gallery, to the poetry group and the photography group. So and then there's all these individual artists, and a lot of which don't show up in any of these sort of things is the amount of artists and actors and directors and arts-related professionals that have moved to St. Mary's and made St. Mary's their home. And they're just sort of living their own lives in their neighborhoods, doing their thing, but there's an awful lot of arts professionals that have either moved here or retired here. So, but the need of something that brings everything together, an arts calendar that works with tourism, that helps with economic development, that an overarching organization that just supports and promotes arts and culture in this area, was something that definitely came up. And then I've included just a smattering of some of the interesting quotes that I took out of the interviews that I just thought, you know, really support some of the ideas that people are saying. And there was quite a few people, and I've got the quote, you know, it'd be great if St. Mary's became a creative hub, something like Halliburton or St. Jacobs or Elora, these small communities that have embraced the arts. And I think Elora is a really good example of that, how you've got a community that is about the same size population-wise, but they've got a thriving art center that has a gallery, a really good gift shop, studios for artists, spaces that people can rent. They've got the benefit of, I don't know how many of you have been to the Elora Center for the Arts, but they also have grounds and they do weddings and they do, I mean, that place is active all the time and their budget is about $1 million a year. Having an arts organization with a budget that's about $1 million a year in a community of about 8,000 is pretty amazing. And it is Elora, I mean, they've used the arts and culture as well as the natural beauty of the area to become a tourist draw. And I think that we also, you've got natural beauty here too. I think that there's no reason why St. Mary's can't work towards something like that. So yeah, there's just a lot of quotes that I'm not going to read out because there's really no point in doing that. So then I've also defined the difference between a public gallery and a community gallery, because I think that right now it's the St. Mary's, that's on page 22. Yeah, there. Refers to itself as a public gallery, which has certain connotations which it doesn't really follow right now. Right now it's operating more as a community gallery, which is more common in small communities. It's, you don't have the restrictions and the obligations and the requirements that a public gallery has. To be a public gallery, it needs to have full-time professional staff that are paid. You need to be a charitable nonprofit. You have a different mission where you're really promoting art and education, and you're not selling it. I think that's one of the big defining features as well, is that public galleries don't sell work unless it's for a fundraising auction or some kind of fundraising event, or it's in a gift shop. You can't have work on exhibit for sale. You also, that means you have to pay artist fees, which sort of takes you into a different category. Community galleries have much more latitude on what they do. Typically, they are charitable nonprofits. In this case, the Station Gallery hasn't been set up that way. It is something that they could work towards, and I kind of outlined that in my report, that what I would recommend is starting out more as staying like they are, working with the Town of St. Mary's, using the qualified donee status so that they can start seeing if there's memberships and donations are viable for them, if there's enough community support, and also start applying for grants through the town to test the waters, per se, before they embark on becoming a full charitable nonprofit, because there's a lot of restrictions that go with that, and just adds a lot of work. If you can start testing it out before you do that, it just makes it a bit easier. There are some challenges with using the gallery the way it is, and I outlined that. The main one, I think, is that the space is bisected by the use of the VIA station. You've got a front door and a back door that VIA passengers go through, which it just changes the way you use the space, it changes sight lines, it changes a lot of things. It also impacts safety and security of the artwork. You can only exhibit certain types of work because you can't have something fragile that someone's going to bring a suitcase and have all their friends hugging and artwork is getting destroyed in the process. You've got 3 big benches which are not historical or to the space, which were added later, so they're not original. And they take up a lot of physical space. They also impact art placement and sight lines. I think one of the big problems is the electrical service in the building is inadequate. Luckily, they've changed all the lighting to LEDs, but if you wanted to do an exhibition that was sort of highly tech, that had a lot of other electrical needs, you couldn't do it, or if you're doing a class, you can't really operate a hairdryer to dry watercolors at the same time you got lights on. It does impact the way they use the space, and I don't know if that's something that can be changed, but I think it's something to definitely sort of note as the Station Gallery or anyone else uses the space moving forward. I think Cameron's been really innovative in how he's chosen to light the work without doing any permanent changes to the space. You've got a temporary system of kind of desk lights that are illuminating the artwork. Not particularly flexible, not particularly the way you should do that, but it works for now, but I think it's something that would need to be investigated long-term, looking forward. There's definitely a lack of storage. Galleries need storage. They've got plinths for work, they've got ladders, you've got paint, you've got places you need to store crates and packing material, which right now they expect people to take off-site. But any storage that is there gets sort of put in the office, which just makes the office look less professional and kind of messy. So there's a lack of storage. There's temporary partial height gallery walls, which again function, but it sort of fights with the architecture of the space and also limits what you can show there because you can only show small work. You can't do anything large or big. I think the most successful renovations are where you actually embrace the architecture versus fighting it and work kind of around the architecture that's there rather than hiding it, and then making use of temporary walls. Again, this is challenging this space because you've got the benches and you've got the bisected space. The ticket kiosk protrudes in the space, which again was an addition in, I believe, the 60s. So it's not, again, historic to the space. Long-term use, I would recommend getting rid of that and making that a flat wall. You still have a small ticket space because it juts out on the other side or on the exterior side. In the meantime, I think using the ticket kiosk as the office for the gallery allows them to use that space, freeing up other space in the building. There is limited space to expand programming. I think, again, they are making use of what they're doing, but I think it could be configured a little bit more effectively. Climate control is always an issue in our galleries. It's an old building. You've got 2 exterior doors that are entering right in the space, making it hard to cool it or heat it, and you're letting hot air in the summer, you're letting cold air in the winter. There's no kind of climate control. There's just a lot going on architecturally. Like if you look at this photo, there's blue walls, yellow ceilings, this kiosk thing that protrudes in the space. You've got benches, you've got, half walls. There's just a lot going on. And I think there's ways to sort of simplify that and make it look more cohesive. Again, I think the potential of the space could be maximized. And then the location is hidden and perceived to be too far from downtown. But again, with proper, that's a challenge, but it also can be an opportunity because you can actually promote it in a way that makes it a destination. And anything can be changed with marketing and promotion. The administrative challenges are that the gallery model is not defined. What kind of gallery is it? And I think that was something that came up in the interviews. Is it a commercial gallery? Is it a public gallery? Is it a community gallery? Is it a gallery just for the St. Mary's Arts Organization, the St. Mary's Artists, or whatever they're called? So people were really confused about what it is and how it operates, and is it part of the town? Is it separate? Does Cameron own it? Does Cameron not own it? There was just a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about that. There's no legal status, making it difficult to raise funds without some sort of nonprofit status or connection or a legal or a agreement with the town to raise money. It's hard to know what to do. So I think that's something that needs to be defined going forward. Earned revenue streams aren't maximized. I've got a picture of the gift shop here. Gift shops can be lucrative. I think especially right now where you've got Stonetown Home Creatives that just closed, and you've got 20 odd local makers who are looking for places to sell their work. There's always makers looking to sell work. I think making the gift shop more appealing, attractive, marketing it better, having a better range of merchandise would allow for a better earned revenue stream. Again, that takes money and time. And I think that, again, they've done as good a job as they can with the limited resources, but I think a bit of, someone that knows a bit more about merchandising could increase the revenue stream in the gift shop. Right now, and I think this is a big issue that the town needs to think about, the gallery needs to think about, is the liability risk. Is right now everything's operated under the director's name. It's not set up as a sole proprietorship. It's not set up as any legal entity. So there is a risk because everything's right now everything's in Cameron's name. I believe will probably get switched over to Duncan's name. So what happens, right? You're not paying WSIB, you're not paying any of those things. So there's just a liability risk there that needs to be dealt with. There's no consistent metrics. Again, this is an easy fix, just finding ways to really track, how many people are walking through that door. Who is it? Are they families? Are they seniors? Are they kids? Who is it? And that's just something that just needs to be tracked. But then also just making sure that they know numbers on things, how many people are in classes, how much money is coming in, how much money is coming in the donation box. Just really tracking metrics is important if they want to move forward in any direction. They're under-resourced, both money and human resources. Running a gallery with a budget of $20,000 to $30,000 a year is hard. The arts are hard. And then having it open, 4 to 5, 6 days a week. And now that we're offering classes, it's tough with the staff they have and the resources they have. Right now, the staff are paid an annual honorarium, not an hourly wage or salary. Again, attracting and keeping good people is hard. You've been really fortunate in that you've had somebody that's been willing to do that for an honorarium. Going forward and making it sustainable, that's tough. You should be, I think the gallery has to work to at least being able to pay, Perth Huron County living wage at the very least. But again, that means more revenue has to come in. Basically, the current operational model is not sustainable. I mean, and again, I think that's credit to Cameron, Sylvie, the volunteers, everyone that's been engaged with the gallery, that they've been able to keep it going for 9 years, but it's just not sustainable. I mean, in the last month, the Textile Museum in Toronto has closed, at least temporarily. They're hoping to reopen in the fall, but they don't have the budget to keep going. I don't know how many of you heard, but the Fashion History Museum in Cambridge just announced on Sunday, I guess, that they're closing effective March 31st, unless they can find a new home like ASAP. So the arts are having a hard time, and you need to have a model that is sustainable and a plan to move forward. And the current way they're operating is not. So changes have to be made. So the sustainable route forward, again, I just spoke to that. There's a precarious future for the arts. Without proper planning, without a proper a strategic plan, a business plan in place, you're just sort of you're going on a whim, and going on a whim doesn't work anymore. And I think that the arts have always been precarious. I think the fact that we're looking at what's going on globally, and especially with our neighbors to the south, life is becoming more precarious for everything and everyone, and the arts are no different. So I think having a solid plan of how this is going to work forward is important. Arts funding is increasingly competitive, again, for the same reasons. Your major sources for arts funding are the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council, neither of which the gallery would be eligible for at this point. I've outlined in my detailed report how arts funding actually works. It works on 3-year cycles. The earliest that the gallery could apply for either as an art service organization if they went an Arts Council route, or as a gallery if they went the Public Art Gallery route, is basically 2029, meaning they wouldn't see funding before 2030. And to do that, there's a bunch of things that would have to be changed basically within the next year so that they could be operating at that level for 3 years before they apply for funding. Incredibly competitive. Galleries are losing funding all the time. There's a focus both with the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council for excellence, so they're putting their money into organizations that are operating at that really top level, showing work that is sort of globally competitive. Doing that as a small arts organization is difficult, not impossible. It can be done. I think you can't fail to acknowledge that arts audiences are aging. The traditional group of people that especially support arts organizations, but go to them, especially in Canada, are aging. I think, again, the one thing that the gallery has done very well is get young people involved, because that is helping to support a future audience. But that has to be important. Like youth programming, getting families, getting young people engaged with the arts is vital if any arts organization is going to survive. You need to adapt to new technologies and experiential opportunities. People want experiences these days. Especially if you want to attract young people, just going into a space where there's paintings on the wall doesn't attract young audiences. It doesn't attract a lot of money. People want experiences. And if I want to refer back to my sort of recent experience at Gallery Stratford, my most successful exhibitions, the ones that I got the most visitation to, the ones that I got the most donations for, were things that were experiential. And people still talk about those, remember them. They may not remember the artist, but they remember walking into a room where there's 20,000 fabric poppies hanging from the ceiling. And they can take Instagram photos. They remember the video exhibition where I've got 8 video screens of forests and forest noises. They remember things that are experiences. So to survive, you need to be able to need to be able to create experiences. Also, we're so geared up to doing stuff on our phones, so anything that's Instagrammable is going to be more popular and it's going to attract people. If people see images on Instagram, it's just the way it is, they will go there. If you've got a bunch of little paintings on the wall, not very Instagrammable. But again, it's how you use the space, and that's why I'm saying use the space, don't fight with the space. So if you can create exhibitions that use the beautiful architecture of the station, that will attract people in a different way. galleries need to be responsive to their communities, and I think they've done a pretty good job of this, but there's always, being more engaging with the community, getting people involved, and also being open to partnerships and collaborations. And again, I think for a small gallery, they've been really successful at this. The partnerships with the schools, the partnerships with the poetry group, but being open to working with others is really important. So some of the options I've outlined is the main things as remaining at the St. Mary's Via Station. You've already got the gallery identified with that space, so people know it's there, or some people do. It's not a dedicated space as shared with Via, so that is a problem, but also maybe you can use that to your advantage as you do get an audience just because people are going to the train station. Location's not central to downtown, but again, you can create it as a destination. I think the biggest issue with the space really is a limited growth potential. I think you can make it work really successfully right now if you make some changes, but if the gallery wants to grow in the future, there's no room to grow. You can't expand the building because of the limited footprint. It's a heritage building. It just makes it difficult. You can't put an addition on. You can't do much to it. So remaining there, I think, is feasible, and that's what I'm recommending for the short term. But I think that if the gallery can get themselves sustainable, it's worth kind of looking at other locations down the road that have more growth potential. There's the possibility of move to 14 Church. It's a central location, which is great. It'd be part of a cultural community hub, which helps just the whole dynamics of getting people involved. It's got access to a dedicated makerspace studio space, which allows them to have classes. However, that's not going to happen for 3 to 5 years. So that's not something that's going to, it's not an instant solution. The other problem with that space is the limited gallery size in the current footprint, which we'll talk about in a few minutes when we talk about that build project. We're looking at a 600 square foot gallery at most, which again is limitations in terms of expanding in the future. There's also not enough storage to operate a proper gallery. So there's challenges with that as well. I looked at partnering with either the St. Mary's Public Library or the St. Mary's Museum, which is a model that other small towns do use. Neither of the library or the museum have space right now for a gallery. So it would have to be somewhere else. They would just manage it, which then adds to extra staff costs. And they're also, both the museum and the library have limited resources as well, taking on the responsibility of running a gallery. They don't have, the museum would probably be the most likely, but again, Amy and her staff are already kind of taxed and under-resourced. So that's not really a valid immediate option. It might be something that down the road you look at, but it's not going to solve the problems of anything right now. And then moving to another undetermined location is there is no logical place at this particular moment. One of the things that is happening in a lot of communities is churches are getting repurposed. I didn't find any churches that are in that sort of process right now. I know that's happening in Stratford, that's happening around the country. A lot of churches are getting repurposed as other cultural institutions. They can work in a lot of ways. They're often bigger than the station, but there's no church right now in St. Mary's that I know of that is in that situation where you want that to happen. I think the thing, though, is that there is a desire and a need for a gallery. Like, I'm hoping that the option of not continuing the gallery is not on the table. I think that it is a really important thing to anchor the arts and culture in a community. It's also a nice way to attract tourists. So I think helping to define St. Mary's as a destination for visual and cultural experiences is something that is worth considering, and making the gallery an important part of that is important. So I've outlined some options, and this is where I realized I've got a spelling mistake, that I hope that we have kind of a conversation about. So the initial one is St. Mary's Station Gallery, sort of a status quo plus, not a status quo plus. And that's sort of like keeping operating as we are right now, but working towards being more professional. So not making any major changes, with the exception of, working towards allowing the director to earn a professional salary, which I'm saying is at a living wage, which isn't really a professional salary in the museum world, but at least it's better than doing an honorarium. And it allows you to keep a director that's going to stay here and help the organization grow. Continue to develop art classes, both in-house and by hiring outside art educators. And the reason I say this is that you don't earn as much revenue if you hire an outside educator, but it allows you to offer more classes, diversify what you're operating, and also free up your director-curator from not being stuck teaching all the classes and trying to run a gallery and keep the doors open and do everything. So, and also every art educator has different followings. So if you bring in other people, in addition to doing in-house, then that person that takes a class because they like Bob from Stratford might also realize that Duncan's teaching and want to take classes from Duncan and vice versa. So you can have a really active art education program by doing in-class and hiring outside educators. I think it's crucial that they start a donor membership program ASAP and run this through the town so that donors do get tax receipts. Membership programs can be really lucrative. Donor programs can be lucrative. They do take work. No question. Like, you have to be on top of it, and that's why metrics are important, because you've got to be tracking things. You've got, and I would start with, in their case, they've got an email list from their MailChimp or Constant Contact. Start tracking people in the guest book, put a place for addresses so that, or email addresses, so that people can start leaving information with the understanding that if you're leaving your information, you can be contacted. I started a program in Gallery Stratford in 2018, which I called the Gallery Stratford 100, reached out to initially 10 women that I knew would support me, and then wrote a letter to everybody I could think of, asking them to join for $25 a month, equating that to that's the same cost as going out for a coffee once a week or a takeout pizza once a month. So you sort of bring it down to a level that people can sort of like, oh yeah, I can do that. And I was up to 100 donors within 6 months, which brings in $30,000 a year. So that's, and it was pretty easy. And the nice thing about monthly donor programs is that once somebody signs up, they have to actively quit doing it, as opposed to you every year having to go and ask people to renew. This way you just kind of get $10, $15, $25 a month from people, and it's a really nice way to bring in income. So I think to be sustainable, they have to do something like that, like right away. And to do that, you have to take advantage of the Town of St. Mary's qualified donee status, which allows the gallery through the town to issue tax receipts, because people will donate if they can get a benefit, and I think that a tax receipt is a good benefit for a lot of people. The other thing is, which you're probably not going to hear, but is to negotiate to eliminate the rental agreement with the town. Most galleries, almost anywhere in Canada, the US, most places, pay nominal rent for their space. So it's $1 to $10 a year, which is sort of this symbolic rent that they pay for the use of the space. I don't know of any public galleries in Ontario, for sure, that pay rent if they're in a town building or another government-owned building. And really, we're talking about $2,400 income to you versus not having to spend $2,400 to somebody that's got a $30,000 budget. So, it's not a huge loss of income to the town. I know it is a loss of income, but it's sort of a nice way to help support the gallery in a way that makes $2,400 is, a lot of donations for a gallery that hasn't done that before. Improving marketing communication, that is one thing that I did hear consistently, is that people want to know what's going on. And I know, again, that with the resources the gallery has, they've got posters out there, they put their brochures everywhere, they are on social media, they're on the web, but just sort of improving the quality and the quantity of communications. And again, making it look as professional as the programs that they're offering, just to attract people. People respond to that. And if you make the changes that I suggested in my proposed budget, you're changing the annual budget from $30,000 to $87,000, which does, right now, I've kind of projected a bit of a deficit, but again, that's sort of like, you have to work towards something. So I think that operating on a $30,000 budget just doesn't work. The other thing I'm suggesting, and I think this is what your comment about the in-camera portion of this meeting is that I think that, and this is my recommendation, this is not a decision that's been made, it's just sort of something I'm recommending, is that Cameron has left a really important mark on the cultural fabric of our country. He not only has he come to Stratford and started the Station Gallery, but he is one of the most distinguished and iconic theater designers in our country. He's worked across the country. There's everyone in the arts theater world, if you mention Cameron's name, they know exactly who he is. And so I think doing something to create a recognition of that is important to not just celebrate Cameron, but is also, on a very sort of self-serving way for St. Mary's, a way to ensure the legacy of the gallery can continue. So I'm suggesting that the gallery somehow thinks about how to, I don't want to say capitalize, but celebrate Cameron and keep the legacy of someone that's been supportive to the arts alive. And I think that's something that not just here, but we don't do enough in Canada. In other countries, they really celebrate the arts, and they celebrate people that are important in the arts and culture. In Canada, we don't tend to do that. We do a lot of naming opportunities to politicians, to sports figures. We don't do that to the arts. And I think it is something that personally, I think we should do more often. I think it helps grow the arts in our country, recognize the important contributions that the arts makes, and recognize the important contributions that individuals make to the arts. So I'm recommending that suggesting that the gallery change its name from the Station Gallery to the Porteous Art Gallery to celebrate Cameron. In cooperation with that, I would suggest that whoever sets up an endowment plan to raise money to support that so the gallery has sustainable money going forward. I think raising $500,000 for a gallery that is changing its name is, with somebody with Cameron's importance in this country, is not an unattainable amount. And that would, a typical sort of draws, that would give you an annual draw of $25,000, which is a nice income to a gallery. So it's just, one of the things I'm sort of throwing out there that I think that is worth kind of consideration going forward. So I think if we did that, it gives the gallery a new sense of purpose, allows the gallery to achieve the original dream of operating as a public gallery. I'm suggesting that by mid-2026, assuming that they have a membership program in place and that they're starting to have some success applying for grants, that by mid-2026, they'd be in a position to apply for charitable status. I would try and realign the curatorial philosophy. Right now, they're doing anywhere from 8 to 10 exhibitions a year, which is an awful lot for a small gallery. Change that so that you're more in line with a public gallery and reduce those to 4 or 5 exhibitions. And then I've given an example of transitional exhibition program. I'm on slide 32, or page 32, sorry. Have a major summer exhibition, which is, some sort of well-known regional, national artist that you'd run from June to August, so basically your whole summer season. That would also line up with Stratford Festival season, so if it's something that's prominent enough, you should be able to get people to come here from Stratford. I would suggest doing a juried or curated group exhibition in September to early November, so the fall. And that way you're sort of giving opportunities to local and regional artists, you're getting more people in. Both the summer exhibition and the fall exhibition would be paying artist fees so that you're starting to work towards becoming a public gallery. Do a curated holiday art at market exhibition where work is for sale. If you do those kind of things, even if you're a public gallery, you can make money because it's a fundraising opportunity. And again, there's enough people in this community that, or in the surrounding area, that do support holiday art markets. And so you could do an upscale version of that. I've seen galleries do that really successfully, where it doesn't just look like a junk art sale. It can look really beautiful and wonderful and bring in a lot of revenue. I've suggested being closed for January. It's a slow month. That's usually when the weather's bad. It gives you time to regroup, write grants, do all those kind of things. Take some time off. Do a student exhibition like they do, February, March, and then do an emerging artist exhibition, April, May. And this is just a suggestion of kind of programming. I'm not saying this is what they have to do. Again, we're surrounded by a number of institutions, post-secondary institutions that have got really good art programs. All those graduating artists, art schools need, the artists in those art schools need opportunities to show their work. So you've got, you've got Brock, you've got Guelph, you've got Waterloo, you've got Western, you've got McMaster, all graduating fine art students every year. Having an annual exhibition where you're supporting one or more of them is a great way to raise the profile of the gallery, engage younger audiences, and show the granting agencies that you're doing something that is furthering the arts discourse. I would also suggest utilizing the exterior of the building and grounds for outdoor exhibitions, creating kind of a 24/7 year-round art experience. Again, this could be something that is a nice tourism draw for the community. You can do so much these days with projectors, with lights, with things on the grounds to animate the space. Again, it's Instagrammable, it's appealing, it's fun, it's a way to kind of engage people that may not feel like coming into the space, and because your space is limited inside, it allows you to take the exhibitions outside. And then some renovation to the interior spaces, suspended track lighting. Again, that doesn't interfere with the architecture. You still keep the original lights, but just suspend tracks. They're easy to take out if somebody doesn't want them in the future, but even if you change the building to some other use, having suspended track lighting would be worthwhile, and it definitely enhances the artwork. I would reduce the size of the ticket office, so you're creating a shared gallery via office space, removing the temporary half walls, and either going back to the original architecture or finding other ways to do it so you don't have so much architectural noise. Replace the benches with something smaller and more movable. Painting the walls, the gallery out one unified color will actually enhance the architectural space, not take away from it, and make it more suitable for art. And moving electrical outlets and receptacles, because right now they're in really inconvenient locations so that you can't hang things in certain spots because you have to turn on and off the lights on the walls. And then actively apply for grants. Town of St. Mary's already gives the gallery a community grant. New Horizons for Seniors is a fantastic program for as long as you're doing programs for seniors. You can get up to $25,000 a year. You can pay for some staff costs. You can pay for equipment. You can pay for programs. It's a great way to utilize your space, get seniors engaged, and get some funding. Young Canada Works and Canada Summer Jobs for staff. Rotary clubs are often underutilized. I know the gallery does work with the Rotary Club. I think that there's the potential of going to them and getting larger, more sustainable, ongoing support for change. The Stratford Perth Community Foundation does have a fund that's specific to St. Mary's that often doesn't get utilized to this potential, so they're definitely open to applications. Then there's Trillium. There's a whole bunch of things that the gallery could take advantage of. So can we just go to the floor plan quickly? Sorry. So yeah, you can just see how right now, so I would sort of, move the office to the VS ticket space. The two offices on the south end, I would make the gift shop the far end, the one that they're currently using for the office. If you move the office to the ticket space, use the middle office as more exhibition space, keep the lease space as education space, but also utilize it for exhibitions as well. And then I've gone through what we could do if we moved the gallery to 14 Church, and I just called it Gallery 14 for just a label. But we can talk about that more when we're talking about the how we're going to use that space. But I think the important thing is, you know, and I put a quote here that I took from one of the things, is that being a visually creative community is our niche. We should make arts and cultural central to the identity of St. Mary's. And I think that's sort of something that it should underline this discussion. And then just some of the themes that I heard throughout the interviews was creating a whole art movement, having an organized approach to the arts, creating an arts community, and an umbrella association that supports and promotes the arts were something that were mentioned. So then the other option is that, or the sort of a next phase of this would be having the gallery and more of a regional arts council, which sort of embraces all the arts. So the Arts Council would be sort of an umbrella organization when they're becoming a nonprofit, with the gallery functioning underneath that. Again, what that does, it opens up more opportunities for funding, because you're looking at a broader arts audience than just the station. And then, yeah, sort of basically, you know, kind of what I said. I think the important things are, you know, accessing the qualified donee status, increasing earned revenue, trying to get the staff up to a living wage, and working towards operating as a professional public art gallery. And I know I'm taking a lot of time, so now I would like to open this up to questions. Sorry, I raced.
Excellent. Any questions from council? Councilor Craigmile.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor. And it's not necessarily my first thought was a question, it was more, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but you should ask Amy, I believe that the ticket office, I think it's interior designated heritage.
Okay.
I believe that's,
Okay.
and there's a few other items in there, but I think that's the only intro thing. So that might be an issue with making a renovation.
Okay, because I wouldn't mind, and that would, I think we need, yeah, we need to check it out, because I heard somewhere that it was put in there later, and that it wasn't.
I believe it was a mid-70s edition.
Yeah, okay. So then, I mean, you could keep it, I mean, it's just that it would make the space cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still think you can move the offices there.
And I guess while I'm talking, you provide a lot of information. The report's very detailed. But I think your original recommendation is right on, because I think all the thoughts you've brought up today, in a year from now, there'll probably be some pretty good answers for a lot of those things. Is that not the way I'm looking at it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think it's, the gallery has to sort of move towards
absolutely.
a more professional model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Councilor Pridham.
I'm kind of overwhelmed with the amount of information, and I'm appreciative to have Duncan and Cameron's here, and I've been watching Duncan's reactions as you're going through some of the items that you're talking about, and the shaking of the head and the agreement that I'm seeing as you're expressing how this should kind of blossom and move forward. And so that to me was encouraging, that that's hitting a target that speaks to both of you. The community gallery versus the public gallery, and maybe I'm wrong, but what I see is, because it's kind of that community where you can come in and purchase picture artwork, and if you went to public, then you eliminate that opportunity. So does that eliminate an audience or a draw of people that may want to come just for that purpose, to see what's available and to be able to purchase instead of just a visual?
So I think that can work in two ways. Like what I've suggested ultimately is that when we're talking about 14 Church across the street later on, that the gallery space stay there, that we put in the plan, and that becomes that sort of local gallery where local artists can show their work and sell it. So you still would have that opportunity in town, but the Station Gallery would operate as this nonprofit, separate, more public gallery that can serve that kind of educational exhibition thing to bring in artwork to inspire the community, but also show some work. The way, and so the public galleries can't sell work themselves, or they shouldn't. It doesn't mean that they can't connect artists and sellers. So when in the galleries, I mean, I've almost always worked in public galleries or full commercial galleries. I've never really worked in a community gallery setting. But in a public gallery, if somebody came in and saw somebody's work on the wall, I can't sell the work, but I can connect that buyer to the artist or to the gallery that represents them, so that that transaction can still take place, the artist can still be supported, but the gallery can't actually benefit from that, because they're, as a charitable nonprofit, your purpose is more educational, community, social. It's not commercial, right? And you're not supposed to be competing with commercial entities in town, right?
I need to press this. Anyway, as the Station Gallery is now encouraged to, if that happens, bloom, and they've established themselves very well, and there's an opportunity to transition that gallery into 14 Church, then that would be changing its whole identity as the community gallery to the public gallery. I'm, I guess, reluctant to kind of sideline all of the work that may happen and transpire over the next 3 years to open up a competitive space when we already have something that maybe in a few years very well established, and that could move into a new space, because there is, suggestion of using that maker space and all of those things for classes and such, and instead of duplicating to different opportunities for galleries, just merging into a new space.
So I guess the way I'm sort of thinking about this is that 14, if the Station Gallery can professionalize themselves and develop, 14 Church is too small. So they wouldn't be moving, sort of improving and moving into 14 Church, because that space is too limited. They could still do classes in the makerspace, so you don't have to do them absolutely on site, because they're two kind of different uses. It's nice if you've got a big enough facility and you've got education and your gallery and offices all in one place. Neither spaces are big enough. I think if we're looking, and I'm sort of trying to propose what's going to work now, but also work down the road. So as we look 5 years, 10 years down the road, I really believe that you could have a successful, sustainable, functioning, thriving art gallery here in St. Mary's. And to do that, I think that you almost need two spaces. You need something that the local artists can show in, which I'm suggesting would be in 14 Church, and then something that is a dedicated public gallery that's doing really exciting exhibitions, that's attracting people from other places, that's serving the community, that's inspiring young people, that's doing all those things at the station, and maybe down the road moving into a bigger purpose-built or renovated space that functions them at a more successful level. So I think that, I really, initially when I started this, I'll admit, I thought the gallery should move to 14 Church. Like that was that was gonna be my recommendation. And then the more I worked on this, the more research I did, and the more I talked to people, and just knowing, having run galleries my whole career, what we have at 14 Church isn't enough space for a public gallery to operate properly. It would work really nicely as a local community rental space where artists can rent the space for a month, 6 weeks, whatever that's decided at the time. They can sell work there. They don't have to store anything there. You have, you've got minimal sort of staffing operating costs on that, because it's a different sort of model, it's a community model, and then keeping the more professional gallery at the station or wherever it ends up. I just don't, there's not enough storage at 14 Church. The gallery space is only 600 square feet, which is really, it's nice, but it's not, it doesn't allow room to grow. But I still think the maker space and studio space could be combined, and that could still function as a public partnership, right?
Yeah, so the community gallery, which is kind of the idea of what's at Station Gallery now, would transition to the 14 Church, and then you're asking the Station Gallery to change its whole profile and become a public gallery, and stopping the community gallery, and then not have an extended space at 14 Church where they could incorporate both elements by using 14 Church, which would be the expansion to the space.
So what you're saying is the Station Gallery could operate both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Operate both, and or their input as to what the direction they want to go to. You know, do they want to exist kind of as it is, status quo themselves? I mean, we're saying that this is a great idea, but what about the gallery themselves? How do they sit on this? Where do they see this transition? What I'm hearing is they're looking at, you know, a non-for-profit so yeah, how does that play out for the Station Gallery, that the members that we have now, and how they want to move forward? So yeah, I'm concerned about those things as we try to identify what to do. You know, I don't know.
So a lot of the feedback I got was that we need 2 gallery spaces in town. That we need one that's more professional, that brings things in, that operates more like a public gallery, and then we also need a place for local regional artists to show their work. And so this sort of proposal does both, with the idea that 14 Church will eventually be that community gallery. And then and again, this is like my recommendations, thoughts. It hasn't, I mean, I've talked to Duncan, but Duncan and I haven't worked on this collaboratively, is that, you know, my proposed program, and I mean, Duncan probably has different ideas of what it would be, is that we would still have space for local artists for the time being to still show at the station while you're doing this transition until whatever happens at 14 Church. So you're not ignoring the local artists, but you're starting to bring in professional programming, and you're kind of, over this next year and a half, whatever, you're kind of testing the waters, right? Is this working? Like, if we pay artist fees to the professional artists they're showing, we're still showing community artists and kind of letting them sell their work. You're kind of, because you're not yet a public gallery. Like, you haven't applied for your nonprofit status to be something yet. You're still in this sort of transitional mode where you're running things through the town. So you haven't kind of declared, you haven't put a stake in the sand yet. You can kind of, you're playing both camps. And you can sort of test the waters and see, does that work? Like, are we getting members? Are we getting grants? Which means, okay, we can actually now start operating like a public gallery. Or are we like going, no, that's not working, and we need to do a modified version of what we're doing now, which is kind of a community gallery, and we sell work and we do that, and you're operating more like, say, Southampton does, which is a community gallery which sells work and has art classes, right? They don't do, you know, artists, they don't do proper exhibitions in the like as the way a public art gallery would. Everything there is for sale. It looks like a giant store, basically, even though if it's a one-person show. There's nothing wrong with that model, but that I think there is. I think St. Mary's, because of the nature of the creative community and the people that are moving here, I think, and your proximity to Stratford, the fact that people from London are coming here, the fact that you are attracting tourists from other areas, I think there is space for a public gallery here. Not a huge public gallery, and you're not going to be the AGO, but to do something at a professional level would work. But I still think you need something that is for the local artists, and I think having a small local artist gallery in 14 Church helps with that whole community cultural hub idea. Like, it just sort of animates the space, it does that sort of thing. You know, in the model I've given, it's pretty low cost on terms of the town to run that. You're getting a bit of rental from it. You basically have a committee or staff that picks the artists every year, and then you'd have somebody which, you know, if you've got the reception front desk thing in the 14 Church anyway, they can process payments, right? So it's a pretty easy thing to run. And then you've got the gallery at the station or wherever, yeah. I feel like I'm...
Totally, yeah.
So I guess that, you know, this is strategic priorities, and I guess for myself, I would need to hear from the Station Gallery and how they see this plan and if they want to embrace it and move it forward in that direction, or how the feedback from them for, to be able to make a decision down the road.
And through the mayor, as you can see in our recommendation, in our plan, that's kind of what we assumed council, where council would want to go. And that's what we said in there. In the third that statement is for us to continue to work with Station Gallery to implement their new business plan, whether or not they incorporate, now that we have this as a public thoughts. And then I wrote down, even though in my report or in the recommendations we have for 2025 and early 2026, I wrote down likely we'll need to bring something kind of ahead of that pre-budget so that it's part of the community grant process as a pre-budget presentation, and then you can start to see where all this is going. Because again, there is a lot of information thrown at you today for all of. But we wanted to get it here because, again, you are talking about 14 Church, which, again, is all somewhat incorporated depending on many decisions we're going to be making over the next several months. It all kind of coordinates itself. So on that front, that was our intent as well.
So when it's the new business plan, is it their new business plan? Is it this new business plan? Like that's where I'm concerned about the embracing of whatever that is on the Station Gallery side. And I'm sorry to belabor this, but anyway, that's where I'm concerned.
Through the mayor, very fair comment. So you'll remember when when the Station Gallery brought forward their proposal for the 2025 community grant, we did have a business plan from Duncan on his operations over the next year or so, and you'll see a lot of those similarities in what's been presented here today. But again, there's nuances there, and we'll have to see how that goes. But again, that's the business plan we're talking about. But again, a lot of the similarities in relations to what Angela's put in front of you today as well. And we can reshare that with council if you wish.
Okay, any other questions and discussion from council? I guess I would say just, Councilor Pridham, sure, yeah.
Sorry, this Arts Council. And something that the town would, is it something the town would, I think I read that, hire into a position to lead that? Or is it a grassroots kind of groundswell of interest and support where people come and volunteer and be actively involved? I just, I'd like to see more of a groundswell, I guess, than put someone in place and try to rally the troops.
No, it would be a groundswell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think one of the proposed budgets I gave would be, maybe the town would, come up with a $20,000 grant to help support the Arts Council and the gallery together. But I think it would have to be, again, I think having an Arts Council that is part of the town doesn't really make sense. I think it needs to be a community thing, right? And whether it's, becomes some sort of arrangement. I mean, BIAs are different because you're getting tax levies, whatever, but something where it is gotten more support from the town. Like when I look at some of the models that I looked at, some arts councils get a fairly sizable grant from their towns to help run them, but it wouldn't be a town position. It would definitely be a grassroots separate nonprofit, but would work in conjunction with the gallery, but help embrace all of the arts and everything from, like the music shop to, artists to all the different arts organizations, like bring them all together so that there's one voice that is supporting arts and culture in this community, but also working in tandem and partnership with tourism and economic development and the downtown BIA and, bringing all of this together I think the thing is you've got no other arts council in the county. Like Stratford doesn't have an arts council. Perth County doesn't have an arts council. Like, I think if St. Mary's did that and took that on, that would speak volumes in, cementing you as an arts and cultural center. Because not only are you helping your community, you're helping the whole county, or the Arts Council is, but it also gets buy-in from everybody, right? And it also brings, and that's why I said, I presented it as a St. Mary's and Region Arts Council. It also makes your membership so much bigger, right? And Perth County on its own does have some money, right? So it means that St. Mary's doesn't have to support this on their own. You can get money from South Perth, North Perth, Perth County. Like, I mean, they're not rich, but there's money out there, right? I mean, it just broadens your support.
Councillor Luna.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm going to be the black sheep of council, I guess, today, because you and I had this conversation when we met. I am not an arts person. I wouldn't know a Monet from a Da Vinci. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm no offense meant to anybody here, but I'm not. I never have been, and I guess at my age I never will be. Saying that, I don't not support any of this, but I'm not 100% in support of all of this, because with our current economic situation today, I'm very fearful of committing to almost anything that doesn't support St. Mary's and Ontario and Canada as a sovereign state. I'm going to get off on the wrong tangent here, so I'll try to stay on track. But I guess my question is for Mr. Moran. When you, that we authorize staff to work with the gallery staff, how much is that of a cost to the town, first of all?
Through the mayor, so it's not so much as a cost as is an opportunity cost. So we see that piece, again, I'll caveat that comment based on so far what we've heard at committee level on the downtown service delivery review is open space, community space that is used for different functions. And we've seen an opportunity of some of the work Duncan's doing as educational space in that north area as an opportunity to bring in more groups to use that space to see if that need is true and real. And then there may be some financial components to that, whether that's donations to the gallery, donations to the train station, or some sort of minimal rent for us. So there's no real cost for us to do that. The cost becomes if we have another use for that space or want to rent out that space for some other function, then then we lose that opportunity to rent that space to somewhere else. But at this point in time, as we're going through the downtown service delivery review, we didn't want to permanently occupy that space with anything else, rental or otherwise. So that'll be a decision that comes forward as you go through this process.
But staff time is a cost to the town. Whether they use an hour or 100 hours, that's a cost to the town.
Correct, and sorry, to clarify, what we wanted to do is work through with the Station Gallery and how they can help organize that space so it wouldn't take a lot of time from the staff's perspective. It would be kind of joint. And again, that's where we thought if an outside group wants to use that space, they'll work through the Station Gallery to use that space, and again, maybe give them a token donation to use that space, and we're hands off. Is what we've seen as an option.
And then if I can add to that, if we're, I think we're all worried about the sovereignty of our country, right? But I think the arts and culture is an important part of that. And I think when we think about history and we think about what identifies places, what do we think about? We think about the arts and culture. We think about it's the people that occupy things. It's the people that make things. It's the people that, the buildings we have. So I think that, in this time, there's a ton of competing needs. Like, I think we all know that. But I think arts and culture is something that we turn to when times are difficult. I think it's something that helps mark what's going on. Artists respond to the environment. Artists help educate us. So I think that, supporting arts and culture is difficult. And every community is going through this right now. But I also think that the little bit we put into arts and culture does pay off. Why do we go to Europe when we travel? Because we love the buildings and we love the art and we love the churches and we love the people. Arts and culture is it's what marks us and how we what defines us as humans. So I think that, I know we had this conversation, but I think that arts are important an important part of civilization, an important part of society. So I think that finding ways to support them, and I think what I've tried to develop here is a model that isn't heavily town supported. No gallery can survive unless you've got a foundation or a funder that originally started it, without some sort of municipal or university or government support. Almost every gallery has some sort of parent, but I've sort of tried to outline something that will help the Station Gallery become more self-sufficient and sustainable on their own with some support from the town. Not, you know, I didn't, you know, I looked at, should it be under the museum or the library? But that would require, you know, like a 65 to 100,000 a year staff person. And I mean, it would require way more resources from the town than kind of giving a $10,000, $20,000 whatever grant a year to the Station Gallery and some space and allowing them to develop and flourish. So I think, I mean, yes, I'm biased. I've made my career in the arts, but I've done that and because I really believe it's important. And, you know, like I've got an MBA, I've chosen to work in the arts. I make a fraction of what I would make if I was working using my MBA in some corporation. But I do it because I believe the arts are important for society. You know, some of my fondest memories are watching kids or seniors or whoever come into the gallery and have that aha wow moment. Like watching somebody get engaged with the arts is probably one of the most amazing experiences. So, you know, I think that you've got something, you've created, whether it's intentional or not, this creative spirit in this community, and allowing that to thrive and grow, I think is just amazing. And I think it'll help with the economic development. I think it's going to help your community. So, you know, I think that the model we've set out is, you know, and obviously this is, you know, this is a draft report. Like it has to, you know, hear back from all of you. You know, it has to go through town staff, has to work with the, you know, this personnel at the Station Gallery and their volunteers. But I think it's sort of, what I tried to do is create something that provides sort of a base that we can grow from and grow on without a huge burden to the town, but a real benefit to the town.
Okay, any other questions? Councilor Pridham.
It's not really a question. The visual experience for attraction, I really kind of like that idea, making St. Mary's that destination for a visual experience. Just coming into the town is a visual experience, but then adding to that with these different elements. And just because of your conversation about Canadian and our Canadian identity, and again the groundswell of Canadian identity and the individuality and who we are is so strong right now, and maybe that's something that could be capitalized in a visual experience if St. Mary's was that place to come and do the Instagram moment with Aviv or whatever that may be around the town. It's just popped into my mind, so I wanted to say it out loud so that it was something that, you know, how when you bring an idea and if it catches, it just kind of grows. But anyway, that's, yeah, I thought I'd mention that.
Councilor Edney.
Thank you. I won't prolong this either. I just want to say that you used the word once in the whole report, but I think it's everything you've said. I think the most important thing, and thank you to Chancellor Luna for bringing it up, but art in its base form is meant to be transformational. And that's the most important thing. And I've watched it transform people, like whether it's visual, whether it's music. So I believe in its importance, especially in this moment. There's very little, and as you mentioned as well, art holds a mirror up to society and says, this is what you look like right now. So I think it's super important, but I'm also analytical, so I understand where you're coming from. So, yeah. And I think you put together a fairly responsible kind of report and response, and I look forward to trying to support that in whatever way possible.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions from council? Councilor Lucas, yeah.
I'll chime in here. I've been struggling a bit with this report because it's a very fulsome report. To me, to me, it's a business plan or a very excellent start of a business plan for the Station Gallery, which I think is great. I sit back as a counselor and say, okay, I appreciate this roadmap being laid out for us. And as council, we've committed year over year to the gallery and to some sort of something going forward. And I guess I look at this report and I say, okay, well, kind of here's the roadmap. Come back to us when you've got something going. Like my struggle is I don't know as council that we're spearheading this. And I appreciate how fulsome this report was, but I was kind of like, okay, this is awesome for somebody that's doing the work. And I'm not doing the work. And I don't think as council that's our role to do the work. I think our role is to support it. But again, whether it's the gallery or a startup business or whatever it is, it's up to whoever's doing it to move this forward. And I guess I just struggled with the amount of detail and amount of stuff in this report. It's like our CAO said, get out of the minutia. So I needed to pull myself up and say, okay, but what does this mean to us at the end of the day? So I guess it's not really a question, but it's just a comment that I think this is great. I think there's a ton of information. Duncan, Cameron, you guys go do your thing. Report back to us. Let us know where you're at. Let us know what's going on. But it was just a lot of information for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from council or comments? I figure I'll take the time and throw my own 2 cents in here. I think holistically, I agree with Councillor Craigmile in that I think the next year will kind of shape the view of a lot of the content in this presentation, and we'll have kind of a better understanding of what exactly we can or are willing to take on as a result of, I guess, the report back in 2026. So until that time, I think that, yeah, we're gonna have to hang on. And that being said, I think there's some really excellent things in here I had never considered. And, you know, if there's a way for us to capitalize on the arts and cultural basis that we have in St. Mary's, which I know is strong, then I think that's incredible, and you've done a lot of excellent work here. So, but for now, I think that the staff recommendation is sound. Okay, any other questions or discussion? Let's take it home. All right. So the recommended motion is that COR 14-2025 Station Gallery Feasibility Review Report be received, and that the Strategic Priorities Committee recommends to Council that Council direct staff to continue working with the Station Gallery to implement their new business plan for the remainder of 2025 and into early 2026, until such time the decision can be made about the gallery's long-term operating plan in relation to 14 Church Street, and that Council authorize staff to work with gallery staff to open the north room of the VIA station, currently used for gallery educational programming, to other arts/culture groups for programming to test the market relating to 14 Church Street concepts. Somebody willing to move that motion? Councillor Edney. Second, Councillor Craigmile. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? All those not in favor? Carried. Okay, so next we will have 5.2, Admin 10-2025, the Downtown Service Location Review, Space Needs Analysis Recommendations for 14 Church Street. Yeah. Let's do a quick break. Everybody down for that? Yeah. Nice little 5-10 minute. All right, we're back from our very brief break, and we're going to continue on with the downtown service location review. Mr. Kittmer, take it away.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So much like the previous report, we'll have Angela speak to a good chunk of council's deliberations today. But given how infrequently this report has come forward at the council level, I just wanted to I'll go through a brief timeline of how we got to here and truly what I'm trying to achieve today. So really, this project began in April of 2022. So it was at that meeting where we disclosed the purchase of 14 Church Street. And then the council of the day charted out a project model for how to complete the downtown service location review. So at that point in time, council debated whether or not they looked after this project at the staff level or if it became a public-facing project. And there was some interest in council of the day to have this be a public-facing project because there was some concern about whether or not there would be public buy-in for our purchase of 14 Church Street. We were successful in receiving a modernization grant from the province, and really that was for a project that would review how we operated in and around the downtown core, with an ultimate goal of making recommendations of how we best use Town Hall, 14 Church Street, 5 James Street being the train station, and then what we do with Service Ontario. In 2023 is when we began the project in earnest, and it began with a public engagement survey that went out to all of the public, essentially asking them how they experience our services in and around the downtown core, and as well if they had their choice, what the town might use and locate at 14 Church Street. We paused the project in early 2000 or about mid 2023 because I think one of the things we realized at that point in time was that the only true space needs analysis that we had sitting on the books was one from the library from 2017. So we knew that the library as a stakeholder in this project would come forward and probably request space at 14 Church Street in particular. So we allowed them some time to go through a process of sorting out what they may need for space or what they may want for space. That took some time and was led by our facilities department, and through early 2024, that space needs analysis occurred. The recommendation coming forward from the library board that was communicated to council was that the library could benefit from around 2,700 square feet of space over a 10-year planning period to 2034. That allowed us to have the information that we felt we needed to then have the project go forward. So you may or may not recall this, but I brought a report to council in May of 2024 that just outlined a few things, and they're kind of key to really what we're looking at today. At that point in time, what we'd explained to council was that although the original scope of this project was to look at 5 James Street, how we operate at Town Hall, 14 Church Street, and what to do at the MOC, because of the passage of time, a lot of decisions had naturally occurred. We had moved out of Town Hall, we had relocated staff to other buildings, we had learned a new way to operate. And what we communicated to council at the time was that we were actually quite comfortable and happy with how we operated out of Town Hall. Service Ontario was in the process of moving to the MOC, so we knew that was checked off the list. So at that point in time, council, you narrowed the scope of this project to a more strategic review of what is located into 14 Church Street into long term, and then again, how we use 5 James Street North. At that point in time, we also brought forward a question about whether or not we felt that the project should still be public facing, meaning do we still have our advisory committee help us with the project, or does it get done at staff level and then report it into council into the future. And the reason we had asked that was because we actually received lots of celebration for us buying 14 Church Street. There wasn't a pushback. But what was communicated to me at that point in time a year ago was that council still felt it was important to have this be a public-led and a committee-led project, because at some point in time, if we see the projects through to fruition, then we will spend money at 14 Church Street, and it'll just help us have a group of people who can generate public buy-in and also explain how and why the building is being used for what it's being used. So we formally picked up the project in the fall of 2024, and what we started with was working with A-Link, who is the project architect, and getting them to summarize all that public feedback we collected in 2023, and in particular, the public feedback on how we best use 14 Church Street. The station gallery review began also in the fall of 2024, and we realized right away that there was a natural synergy and that one decision could be made without the other. So we brought on Angela to help us out with the downtown service location review, because of her experience running cultural institutions and the committee needing a guiding voice like Angela's to help us navigate through their process. So in terms of what we're dealing with today, so when we charted out that project early in 2022 and then last year, Today was a key check-in. So my concern all along was having a lot of work done at the committee level, only for it to come to council at the final report stage for council to say, you know, this really doesn't fit with our vision of our community. So I'd always planned and built in this checkpoint that the committee would work to a certain point, work themselves through the public engagement, develop a list of possible uses for 14 Church Street and 5 James Street, get themselves down to prioritizing those, get themselves down to a point where they can say, this is about the amount of space that should be assigned to these uses. But we were never going to proceed to concept design until council had said, yes, we believe that this is our vision for the use of these buildings. We decided that we had to simplify the conversation because we realized that we, as you just also realized through the feasibility review, that you can't really make a decision about Church Street without making a decision about 5 James Street, and likewise, you can't make a decision about 5 James Street without making a decision about Church Street. So it became easier for us to centralize all of the conversation at the committee level down to what are we dealing with at Church Street, and what do we want Church Street to look like, and what's the vision for that space as we move forward, because once we make those decisions, then there'll be some natural decisions that fall for 5 James Street. So that's what the committee's worked on. They had a meeting in December where they looked at that public feedback, heard all of the ideas that the public thought we should be putting into 14 Church, and then gave some direction to staff to say, yes, we want to keep this on the list, or no, we want to move this off the list. Between December and February, Angela worked with staff as well as A-Link to help us understand that list of uses, what the typical space allocations are for those uses. And then we quickly realized at the staff level that we just can't fit everything into Church Street. So at the staff level, we actually worked through a process of prioritizing what we believed were needs and wants, as well as finding best ways to make each space multi-purpose and layering uses over top of each other. So when you look at that list, this chart that's attached, and this was really the chart that we're focused on today, those list of uses independently, like having independent space for each of them, would never fit into 14 Church. But when you start blending uses together, that's when you start seeing that they're all able to fit. We met with the committee on February 25th, and they made some minor changes to this list, and then made a recommendation that I bring it forward to council to have council review and bless the list before we move on to that next stage of concept design. Now, I admit that probably sounds a little bit confusing, because when you look at your package, you'll see what you believe is a concept in here. And this is where I apologize for being candid and direct, but when I talk about staying out of the minutia, what I would like to warn council with is that this is not a concept design in any way. This is just something that A-Link has put together for us, so that when you see something on your list and it says, a vestibule should be 65 square feet, you now have a spatial reference to understand how much 65 square feet take up. But at the staff level, we have not thoroughly vetted this or given comments back to A-Link on changes we'd like to see. In fact, some of the way this is laid out, it conflicts with structural elements in the building. So although it's helpful sometimes for us to hear about, we wouldn't like to see this wall here or that wall there, that's really not what we're focused on today in any way, because we haven't done that at the staff level. This isn't to the point where I'd want it out for public digestion. And my experience at the committee level was I probably wish I hadn't put it out there, because everybody likes to focus on the picture rather than the list, and we want to focus on the list. This picture is really just to help you to understand and visualize the space. If you bless this list today, this next step in the process will be for us actually to take a concept drawing that A-Link produces for us. We'll thoroughly vet it at the staff level, get through our building department as well, so we understand and make sure that building codes are met. Then that will be brought forward to the committee, vetted by the committee, and then it will come to council in a couple of months' time. So that's, I know, a long introduction, but that's how we got ourselves to where we are today. Angela will do a far better job than I ever could at explaining the space needs analysis to you, how we got ourselves down to deciding what was a need and what was a want, and how they will truly be multi-purpose. Councillor Pridham sits on the committee, so she can help with any of the committee process, as well as Mayor Strathy, who's not here today. So I'll defer to Angela.
Okay.
Councillor Craigmile.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Brent, I want to ask a question before we get started, because it's probably going to help me out. My thought always was with the downtown service location review that, and I think they've done a great job and they've whittled it down. They've got certain items that we're looking at today. And those ideas were going to come to council, and eventually council was going to make the decision of, or ask some pretty poignant questions. So I'll be honest, I mean, we can go through everything we're going to go through today, but I'm really not at the stage where I'm going to give this my blessing, because there's one very important thing not there, and that's each of these areas, you know, how much extra staff, what's the actual cost and whatnot, because I'm looking at it long-term, and I'm still thinking long-term. And I'm still thinking that the town may need more office space than what I'm seeing there. And I see no mention of things like the police. And I'm really concerned about all kinds of things that I'm reading through there that might be in direct competition with current businesses in the downtown core.
Yep. So through the deputy mayor, Angela can answer probably some of the questions more directly as we go through it. But I guess to Councillor Craig Miles' point, that's exactly what today's is for. We want those pointed questions. We actually need your feedback today about whether this makes sense or whether we have to send it back to the committee. And so really, that's when you look at my resolution. That's how it's designed. Is you either tell us today that you're happy with the space needs analysis and the path this is going down so that we can go to concept design, or you tell us you're not happy with it, you're not happy with the vision of the building, and we have to go back and rethink it. To some of the specifics, as much as I say state of the minutia, even at the staff level, we realized that it was very hard not to get there. That as much as we want to focus our conversation at the level of, you know, what are we using the building for, it always comes down to how are we going to use it in the future, how are we going to operate it. So you'll see in my report, we made some assumptions. So in terms of staffing, we've acknowledged very clearly that we probably will have to staff up in some small way. Our current answer to that is that the building across the street, if used in the way that it's described here, staffing the building would naturally fall on the person that's using the building. So the example I used in the report is that, you know, the library's, you know, key point of space need and space want is for programming. So if the library was to, you know, schedule the building and use it on Thursdays from say 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, it will be their responsibility to be over there and staff the building. And our assumption again would be that they're not necessarily increasing their service level when it relates to programming. They're going to use existing programming staff, so they'll just use existing staff over there. If a gallery was to be located there in some sort of fashion, and there was gallery staff, now that may not necessarily happen with the decisions that we're looking at going forward with. We were always hopeful that there could be some fill in there. But we do believe that there will be, you know, that building as, you know, a community cultural hub as a current vision will likely need to have different operating hours in our other facilities just to match when the need is. And you know what we learned when we went to Idea Exchange in Cambridge was that the busiest times for a building like Idea Exchange and that the building here is truly in the evenings, right? When youth come down, you know, like the non-recreational youth, the youth who are artistic, the youth who need something else to do that we don't offer today, they typically stop in there in the evening. So we would have to have some staff in the evening. But with our current vision of how we might staff it, if we just say that if you're using it during the day, you use existing staff, we might have to have some new part-time staff in the evening. Not significant cost in terms of 10, 13, 14 new staff, but probably 1 or 2 part-time kind of staff. To your more specific question about the police needs, or the police request for space has never actually been a formal request for space. It's always been a want. And what we've realized over the years is that we probably can't accommodate their space needs based on the way they operate. So what former versions of my report would have said is that the police would like to have a confidential meeting space. But that comes with a lot of cost for us. And it comes with a lot of cost with not a lot of use. So what we've realized over the years speaking with the police is that their best place to go into their business is back in Stratford. So when they arrest somebody or they needed to provide somebody a breathalyzer, we'd always had this idea of they should be able to do all of that in town. But what we've learned through the years through CPAC is that for them to do it in town, they have to have a space that is equivalent to what they have over in Stratford. They need to have a breathalyzer here. There needs to be cameras. There needs to be like a recording system. So our investment to create that kind of turnkey standalone space in the St. Mary's for them was too significant. So at the CPAC level, we've always responded back to them and said, you know, is your 600 square feet that you have here that you use for lunch, that you use for doing reporting, and that you just use for break time, is that sufficient for your day-to-day? And the answer has always been yes. And then when they want purpose-built space, like a confidential meeting space, and it takes thousands of dollars of investment of cameras and things like that, the response from CPAC has always been, we're not prepared to make that investment, because what the police have always told us is that it's more comfortable for them. It means if a cruiser leaves St. Mary's, but it's more comfortable for them to go back to their police station in Stratford, where they have their support from their chief, they have their support from their upper management, they have other officers there. So the police space needs at the staff level was cast aside actually fairly quickly, because what we'd see is a space in town hall that we dedicate to them that probably is never used. And that just didn't make sense for any of us, when really our space is very finite, right? We don't have endless space. That's why we bought that space. And you'll notice in my report that it has always been part of my vision that as we grow as a staff complement over the next 10, 15, 20 years, we will have to have space to grow into. Renovating the MOC is an option, but it's costly. Renovating here really isn't an option because of, again, how constrained we are in an old building. So I think we have to naturally grow into that space and provide at some point in time in the future, administrative side of that building. And when you look at the space needs analysis that we have here today, and Angela will speak to it more, we have provided for that. We're talking about having meeting or study spaces there that would be naturally transitioned into staff workspace into the future, if and when we need it. And I always kind of joke, my joke is that when I move when I have to move the building department downtown, like, where do I put them? Like, how do I put them into that space? And we are thinking about that. So I'm gonna stop talking, because I promised you to hear more from Angela rather than me.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. So I've put together sort of a brief proposal or a brief presentation here just to kind of give you some of the underlying assumptions that have come to light to date, and then also so we can start talking about the actual space needs, which really, the point of today is to hear from you. So through the various meetings, in which I outlined in the presentation, some of the underlying premises are there's a need for a downtown centrally located community cultural hub, and that words like it needs to be welcoming, accessible, designed for the community, but also engages visitors. The space be filled with natural light. This is something that just keeps coming up repeatedly, is that there are windows there. The stone part of the building has the windows bricked or stoned in, but the idea that this building will have as much natural light as possible, that spaces be multi-purpose and open concept. So in addressing, any specific questions, all the spaces, whether it's a meeting room or a study, whatever we call it, an office, meeting room, study space, it's designed so that it could have multiple purposes in the future. The meeting rooms, again, same thing, could be designed for programs, meetings, study, whatever. So the premise is that everything is as multi-purpose as possible, that it includes a maker space, art studio, an art gallery, various size meeting rooms, community meeting gathering space, space for future expansion of municipal offices, and will accommodate adult learning. Those are kind of the underlying premises. Space for the expansion of St. Mary's Public Library program, and the first partnerships and collaborations within the community. The facade came up repeatedly. Again, people want the exterior facade to feel attractive and welcoming, preserve and maintain the historic character of the building, windows in the red brick south section of the building to maintain original character, so not be just replaced with vinyl nondescript windows, and then windows in the stone north section to be opened up, enhancing the architectural aesthetics and facade. So this is where we get into looking at the actual space needs. So on the main floor, the idea is that it has to be natural light. There's a desire for it to be natural light filled, open concept, and multi-purpose. It was designed right now with the idea of two main public spaces, a large meeting community gathering space and an art gallery. That there would be movable wall partitions to incorporate into the large space so it could be divided for different uses. That there'd be a central reception area which would also function as a tourist information. And the idea of a central reception area is to do exactly that, is cut down on staff. So you don't have to have staff in a bunch of areas. You can have one staff person that is overseeing the entry and exit from the building and helping guide people do whatever. And that there is some sort of gift shop, market space for the gallery, library, tourism. And the idea that Friends of the Library might not want to, in the future, just do a two biannual or semi-annual sales, maybe have some of their material in a central space where people can buy it all year round. If the gallery was to move over there, galleries need gift shops for earned revenue. Also, it could be a little space which would be, if tourism wants to get to the point of having branded merchandise or whatever, and a place where you can have brochures and tourist information. So it's not really a market space as in competing with town businesses, more like a little space where you can sell specific things to support the partners in the organization, and also as a tourism center. So what we've done, if we look at the main floor space needs, and I've sort of taken the chart and made it sort of divided it by floor so you can sort of see the actual space needs per floor, is we've looked at the individual spaces that people have requested, plus certain spaces that you just need to function the building, and allocated square footage to them so that we can get an idea of how we fit this all into the available 3,500 square feet per floor. So that's the maximum space we have. There's certain things that you have to have, like you need circulation space, lobbies, receptions, stairs, elevators, which takes about 1,300 square feet. You also need to have washrooms. You need to have a universal washroom in the building, as well as 2 unisex restrooms for the public. That takes another just under 200 square feet. So you almost have basically a 1,500 square feet of your 3,500 that isn't programming space. That is just, you need that to function. So that can't really be played with much. There's not much we can do to change any of that. What we can look at is the main floor programming public space. And so what's come up in discussion is that there's a desire for a big meeting room. There's also a desire for community gathering space, place that's open that the community can use for various functions, that they can just hang out if they want to come into the building, have an informal meeting, go someplace other than a coffee shop. Also a place that you can have larger meetings. Originally, those 2 spaces were separated, and on the chart they are. So you've got a large multi-purpose programming space at 700 square feet, and then you've got a community social gathering space of 375 square feet. If you combine those together, you've got just over 1,000 square feet, which gives you much more options for different things. So it also means that you could potentially have it as a small event space if the town wanted to get into the rental wedding business or whatever. But it just gives you earned revenue opportunities and just more functionality for all kinds of different things, with the idea that there would be possibly some sort of dividing movable wall that could be put in to make it more private, to divide it into different spaces, whatever. The art gallery is designated around 650 square feet, which is on the small side, but still functional for an art gallery. And that's where the discussion early this morning about moving the station gallery there, like as your sole kind of gallery in town, is a small space. It also only, you need storage space, which isn't really accounted for. In the little conceptual drawing or space drawing, they've got a tiny little gallery storage space, but that wouldn't actually function as a gallery storage in the big picture of things. The market space is designated at about 125 square feet, and we see that as I said, a place where the library could sell things for money, earned revenue. The gallery could potentially do that. Tourism could potentially do that, and also a place where you could have tourist information. A servery, if you're going to have a building of this size, having a place that is a small bar kitchen type thing, which has got basically not a full kitchen, but a fridge, maybe a dishwasher, sink, some storage for cups, saucers, wine glasses, whatever you want to do, depending on whatever the use of the space is. Having that, again, in the diagram, they've, just so that you can get an idea of the square footage, they've designated that as a room. In the discussions we've had, we don't see that as a separate room. We see that more incorporated into the community space, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what the square footage looks like. There has been discussion about the library moving some of their teen collection over to or some collection over to 14 Church. That's taken a lot of discussion at all levels so far. What's been decided or agreed upon at this point is that there's not going to be designated collection space over there. If down the road we decide that we want to move, or the library wants to move some collection over there, it would be on movable storage racks so that it could be incorporated into the community space, but not have designated space. So it's kind of like a programming thing down the road as opposed to a space planning thing right now. Building planning has also requested very much, which makes a lot of sense, which wasn't on the initial plan, is that some storage be included on the main floor, even if it's just for like mops, vacuums, basic cleaning, maintenance sort of things, but having some small storage area there. So basically the main floor is kind of public, open, welcoming, engaging, the kind of things that people are going to come and go, are going to use the building. It would be sort of the most used space of the building, plus it's the first thing you see. If you look at your drawing again, there is 2 staircases which you have to have for the size of the building and just for egress and exit. And right now the staircase is lined up against what would be the window wall. Again, none of anything that's in these drawings is not written in stone. This is not what it's going to be. It's just kind of there for space placement. We did a walkthrough with the architect a week ago and talked about some of these issues, and told him that, ideally we don't want a staircase where windows would be. But that's not, again, we're not looking at what this drawing's going to be. It's just sort of for spatial reference. And we'll go back for a discussion of all these spaces. I'm just going to run through all the needs right now, and then we'll go back and look at each floor individually. On the second floor, again, there's a desire for natural light, and also to keep the ceiling height. I don't know how many of you have been over to the building recently. I've got a small little photo that I took last week when I was upstairs, and you can see the height of the ceiling. There's some iron girders, like, is there iron? Girders that sort of span the space right now, but there's ceiling height above that. So the plan right now is that those would be exposed and the ceiling height would be raised as much as possible, making it feel quite open and light and airy. There's a desire to eliminate corridor space as much as possible so that, again, like in the main floor, we're incorporating multi-purpose space into the corridors. So there's not just defined hallways, but it's kind of feels more open. The adult learning classroom, because adult learning does need space over there, is, again, not just dedicated to them, that when they're not using it, it would be a digital lab, which is becoming more and more of a need now and into the future for public spaces and especially libraries. At least one of the small study, meeting rooms, offices would be soundproofed and wired for a recording studio. Again, this is becoming something that is needed now and in the future. People are doing, they're doing Zoom calls, they're doing individual podcasts, they're doing all kinds of content creating. So having a small classroom or a small meeting room that is soundproofed and wired, so it could be used as a personal or 2-person recording studio, is desirable, and it still could be used for other purposes. It's just soundproofed so that it's adequate. When we were in Cambridge for our tour, they had 2 of those rooms, which are booked almost nonstop. There is a desire for that. Her Collab in town has a little office that also can do recording. It's not fully soundproofed. You have to be a member. It's got much more restricted use. It is used fairly frequently, but there is desire for something like that. The study spaces and small meeting rooms would be shared between library, adult learning, community, and future municipal office space. So again, the sort of underlying assumption of all of this is that everything is designed so it can be multi-purpose, multi-used, and can be flexible for now and going into the future. The makerspace is designed so that it's large enough so that it could be a makerspace and an art studio, both for use of, say, the gallery, but also the community. Again, in my interviews for the Station Gallery, I heard that there's, people would like to bring in, different groups like to bring in artists to do workshops or lectures or classes, or, you know, people would like to hold them themselves. So there's no real space in the town where you've got kind of a studio space that can get messy, that can have water, that can have all those sort of things that a makerspace art studio would have. So kind of a fun, messy space, basically. So again, like in the first floor, there's certain space that you can't play with, that you just need for building operation, which is your circulation, corridors, stairways, your restroom, and then sort of general storage. So again, that's taking around just under 1,500 square feet. So you're left with about 2,000 of usable programming space. And that's being divided up between programming public space and sort of office study space. So again, we've got a makerspace, art studio space of about 700 square feet, which is substantially larger than the library currently has. But if any of you have tried to use the makerspace in the library, it's pretty cramped, it's not very welcoming, the equipment isn't all there. So having a place where people can actually come in, use it, work on projects, both the library but also the community. Makerspaces are becoming increasingly used by individuals and small businesses because it gives you a place to make your own vinyl, create signage, do all kinds of things. So makerspaces are almost a given in most communities these days, and then combining it with the art studio allows you to have a bigger space and more people using it. Adult learning needs both a classroom space and office space for 2 people. Again, the classroom space would be multi-purpose, so when adult learning is not using it, which they need it, but they don't use it, you know, every day, all day. It could also be a digital lab for the community to use, or for the library to use, or the gallery to use, or some community group to use. Their office space could also potentially be multi-purpose or multi-used, as long as they have space to secure personal files. So as long as there's a secure locked filing cabinet somewhere, it could function potentially as a hot desk environment where they're using it, but other people could, say the library has to have staff over there, the gallery needs staff over there, that they could kind of perch and work in this adult learning office. Community meeting space for 10 to 12 people is something that's being expressed during various meetings, and also just in feedback in the community, that there's nowhere, if you want to have a small board meeting or a small group meeting, that you can, that's a nice place that you can meet in town. So that's sort of a 10 to 12 person space, which is about 250 square feet. And then 2 meeting study spaces of about 90 square feet each, which could be used by anybody that needs to book them in the community, or anybody that needs office space or study space. But that's in addition to office space, or which is also can be used as meeting and study space. So these are kind of flexible, but we've kind of differentiated them as 2 different causes for the purpose of this. So a shared open office space for 3 to 4 people. And again, this could maybe be connected at some point with the adult learning, just making a bigger office, but we've designated 200 square feet to that. 3 municipal office spaces at 100 square feet, which again, if the municipality is not using them right now, could be used as meeting spaces, study spaces, whatever spaces for the community in the meantime. And then a unisex barrier-free washroom, so not a full universal, but a barrier-free so somebody can use it, but it doesn't have all the full bells and whistles that universal restroom has, would be up on the 2nd floor. And then some storage, which again comes to exactly 3,500 square feet. And then in the basement, and again, this photo was taken fairly recently, if you haven't been down there. One of the things that didn't come up in any of the initial meetings, but became apparent in just both the community meeting and staff meeting, is that we need a staff lunch and break room, because that wasn't in any of the initial lists. So we've delegated that to the basement. The Friends of the Library definitely needs storage over there, so that's a priority. Their storage in the library currently is, the library basement's not dry. So having a workspace for them is important. And then a large flexible storage area, which could be divided so that Friends of the Library could use it, could be general building storage, it could also be used by tenants. In talking to the building and planning staff, they envision this as kind of a fence, chain link, whatever kind of open concept area that could be divided as needed, but also has flexibility to be changed down the road if and when you need to use this for more municipal space. There is, and I should know this and I can't remember, the ceiling height's decent. It doesn't feel like a closed-in basement. You actually could finish the basement and you don't have natural light, but you do have decent space. So, but right now it's sort of designated as non-public space, so you wouldn't need to staff that. It would be some sort of code on the door to get down there. So any staff, if they want to use the break room, people that are accessing the storage, but it doesn't need to be a staffed space or secured that way. And again, same with all the other spaces, you actually have more circulation and support space because it's a basement and less kind of programming space. So again, you need a corridor because you have to be able to access the exits safely. Elevator's gonna have to go downstairs, the 2 staircases again, general storage, janitorial room, mechanical, elevator machine room, all take up space. So you've got, almost 2,500 square feet of just space you have to function, to have the building function, which leaves about 1,000 square feet for programming space, which is combined between Friends of the Library workspace, Friends of the Library storage, gallery storage workspace, or whoever, and then the staff lunch and break room. Again, coming to exactly 3,500 square feet. So in our little proposal here, we've maximized every bit of square footage we could come out of with the needs that people have identified to this point. So the point of today is for you to have input on if you think these are the spaces we need or the uses we need, and if you think the allocations sound about right to you to allow us to move on to the next stage, which would be giving the space allocations that we have identified to the architects to come up with an actual concept, not just this is how much things take up. So an actual, how do we want this building to look and function? Or if you don't like what's here or you want changes, then we make those, we go back to the committee to and the staff to kind of relook at how this works and then come back to you with those changes in, as Brent said, a couple of months. So we've got drawings here. If you need sort of spatial references, we've got the list both in the PowerPoint and also on the chart, whichever is easier for you. But really today is about your feedback. How you feel about what we presented so far, what changes you would like to make, what things are missing, if you think we need bigger space here, lesser space there. This is your opportunity for feedback.
Councilor Edney.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I kind of have just a how something functions question. Museums, art galleries, and possibly libraries to require specific HVAC requirements. Which, does that render it useful, that space useful only for that required purpose?
So no, I mean, I think if you're over-design a space with better HVAC, anybody can go in there down the road, right? But if you don't put that in, it makes it harder down the road. So I think that, and that's part of the thing with collections over there. Do we want to move collections to the library? Does it make sense, right? And then we've gone through lots of discussions about, whether it's worthwhile having collections in 2 different locations. You've got all kinds of issues with that. I mean, it sort of makes people use both spaces in a different way, but and then you would have to have, HVAC concerns. Same with the gallery. If it's just, the sort of way I've sort of thought about it in my last proposal, if we use it more as a local gallery, short-term exhibition space, you need decent circulation. You don't have the same environmental concerns you would as a museum or a gallery that's showing more expensive, valuable artwork, and nothing's going to be there for very long, right? You don't have a collection there. You just are showing artwork for a period of time. You just need good circulation. You don't need, or good HVAC. You don't need specialized HVAC.
That's what I was wondering, is if we had to design the whole building around that element.
No, I think if you were going to put in really professional public art gallery that's borrowing work from, other Class A institutions, yeah, you'd have to have, that space would have to be specially designed for that, and you have to have proper HVAC after all that. I don't think that, Woodstock doesn't do that. Gallery Stratford doesn't do that. I mean, small. What's that?
Bringing in the idea of as much natural light as possible into a gallery is conducive to.
So, but again, that's where we would place this accordingly.
Yeah.
Natural gas, I mean, again, depending on the type of work, if you've got something on the walls for a month, a bit of natural light's not going to hurt it, and it'll be fine. If you, again, you're not going to be able to, get Turner watercolors and exhibit them in a space with natural light. That's not going to work, right? Something that's really sensitive like that or historical, works on paper that are really fragile, you couldn't put natural light. So, but again, the amount of natural light you're going to get in that space, and you look at, I mean, I don't know how many of you have been to Ottawa and you've gone to their town hall, and they've got 2 art galleries there. And the one gallery has natural light coming into it. And it's also got a glass wall that goes into the lobby. And it is well used. I mean, because people that are going to pay their parking tickets or whatever actually, often walk into the galleries. So it is kind of a nice thing. And the natural light does allow people to sort of see in. Like if you've got a window, people can go, oh, that looks kind of cool. So I think you can make it work. Yeah, I mean, ideally, the sort of white cube is the traditional gallery style. But if you go to, again, if you go to Europe and you go to a lot of the galleries, they have, like the Tate Liverpool's got windows in every gallery. So you can make it work, right? I mean, you just have to be careful what you place near the window. But I think, again, that's something that we give a directive to the architect when we're getting to that actual planning stage.
The reason I asked the question is to see what it will drive costs to a place where we have to consider that.
I think I think the uses we're projecting for this, which are much more community public, no, we don't. If we wanted to put the library over there, then yes. If we wanted to put an art gallery / museum type facility over there, yes. But that's not what we're proposing, right?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just wondering if parking has been considered yet, or at what point we do look at parking and.
Yeah, and the answer is no. We haven't got to that point of the how, right? And it's difficult until we know what the building's going to be used for to think about what parking is going to look like. The one thing we do know from our parking survey is that parking in the downtown core is certainly at a premium. I think, Jenna, up until about noon or slightly after noon. And I think the hope was that if this is truly a community cultural hub, we can't be open from 8:30 in the morning all the way till 9:30 at night. We're going to have to ratchet our hours. One of the assumptions that we've made just to help simplify ourselves is that hours probably are going to be more 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 or noon to 8. And if it's open later in the day, parking becomes less at a premium in this area. But I think just parking in general, what we've learned is that we're getting to that point where we have to just sort out any sort of solution in the downtown. So as we move this along, if this was to be blessed, we'll have to then start sorting out what the kind of occupancy in the building would look like during the daytime especially, and where parking could go. And I'm hoping that that's probably 2, 3, 4 years down the road and our parking study is more mature. I think the vision for like the larger uses, so when you look at, say, that first floor and there's that large multi-purpose room, like, a vision for the use of that space could be, when Amy does a larger museum seminar and doesn't have space at the museum, it would happen here. But those always happen in the evening when we know that we have ample parking space in the core. We know it's something that has to be thought about. And once we understand how this, once we know if council says, yes, we bless this vision of the building, and we start over the next couple of years figuring out how it's going to be scheduled, programmed, and used, then we'll understand those uses a bit better and have to give more thought to parking. But even without this building, we still have to sort out a parking issue in the downtown core at some point in time anyways. So not a great answer, but again, not a great answer because we haven't really gotten down to that how level yet.
And I have to say, to add to that, I mean, every time I come to St. Mary's, I drive because I live in Stratford. And I usually have meetings or things in the downtown core. And I have never not been able to get a parking space within like 1 or 2 doors of where I needed to go. So I think parking is competitive, but it's still, there still is parking available. Like, and I'm usually coming in the day. So, I mean, parking's a concern for every single community. Like, I don't know any community that I've ever worked in or lived in where downtown parking's not a problem. And I think it's just people, I mean, again, like Brent said, that a lot of the use would be, you know, off hours, or, you know, I think we should be encouraging people to walk. Like, you know, so I think we can, yeah, once we have a better use of it, what we're doing, I think we can address that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Brent, can you help me out here a little bit on accessibility? Because I think the data's come and gone and we're not quite there yet, but I know at 14 Church Street, anything you do because you're modifying it will be completely accessible, but I'm thinking of some of the older buildings we have that have not had any major construction on them, so they might be accessible getting in the door, but they don't have accessible washrooms. Is there a timeline where that has to be done, or?
Jenna, you might be able to help me, but I thought, was it 2025 is when we had to fully implement the design of public spaces. So in terms of this building specifically, the nice thing about it is the door is at grade, so it already has an accessible entrance. And if and when it's renovated, it'd be to today's standard, which is fully accessible. Which is why when you look at the first floor, they've planned for that full universal barrier-free washroom, including a change table. And then the second floor, they're considering, again, the unisex washroom, barrier-free, not change table. A key design consideration, you don't have to put an elevator into it, but again, the recommendation would be that you do, because it just makes life simpler. It makes it more accessible as well. So this building specifically would have to be fully accessible. All of our other buildings are accessible to, their last renovation date, and as major renovations go forward, we have to then bring them up to accessibility standards as well.
I can just follow up on another question that I did have was, so a lot of these meeting spaces, I understand if Amy's doing something from the museum and they can go to this, but I guess I'm concerned about, if there's no charge for them or whatever, of all the other meeting spaces we have, whether it be the Legion or any of the others in town. Has there been thought given to what, for example, the Lincolns will always rent out space and other people will around, but if it's, I just want to make sure, I'm just trying to get my head around this. Are we taking that away from some of these? The St. James Club, brand new building, rent out space. That's another one of the questions that I have.
How's that? Yeah. So when you think of something like the St. James Club and the Legion, like those are large spaces. I think when you think of again, this one, a meeting room of 280 square feet, maybe 10 to 12 people max. I think the thought was that, small service clubs who need a place to meet. Let's say, for Friends of a Library can't meet across the way today, so they would go and use this place. Like the small little social clubs, like I'm trying to think of like we have like our own, like our Picture St. Mary's, like small groups that are currently meeting in their homes or going to Tim Hortons to meet or going down to somewhere else to meet, they could come and use this space. That was the thought. Whether or not you wish to charge for it, I think is still a decision to be made. At one point, very early on in the process, again, I heard feedback from council that having small free space for small groups to come and meet was going to be a benefit to this project. But again, that will be ultimately your decision whether you charge or not. And I think, if I remember reading in your report, you had other examples of people who come forward and thought that.
So I think there's a lot of small groups, like the poetry group, like the photography group, like Stonetown Arts. People that are meeting with like a small board of, 5 to 7 people or 2 to 4 people, and that would like a nice community space, because right now they're meeting like after hours in a coffee shop and someone has to stay there and open up, or they're meeting in someone's basement or living room, and having a community space to meet people is, or to meet organizations is just, or even just, book clubs or, those kind of groups that want sort of a community welcoming space that aren't going to take away from existing things. And I think I think that's one of the things that we've tried to do through these various meetings is come up with the sizes that are needed, that not to compete with what's at the Pyramid Center or not to compete with, some of the church basements or things that people are already doing there, like what's missing in town. And these were the sizes that came up as missing in town, or just like quiet places to work or meet. Like if somebody wants to, like I just think when I met with some of you, or some of the people I met in the community when I was doing my interviews, I met, with you here in council chambers, but, I had a couple of meetings in Tim Hortons and it's noisy and it's loud and, so people that don't have, because I think more and more people are working at home and they're looking for a place to maybe hold a meeting or meet somebody. And we don't really have that here in town. So this would provide those kind of community needs for small, mid-sized meeting spaces, but not compete. It's not designed to compete with other people in town.
And I think the one thing you probably get peace of mind there is so when you look at the first floor, when you say there's a large multi-purpose space of around 700 square feet, that could accommodate, say, a large board meeting where a person may choose to go here rather than, say, the Legion or even our own PRC or St. James Club. The issue with that is that it's non-exclusive, right? So you can go and have your big meeting there, but you have to understand that this is a facility that's open to the public, and if kids want to come in and hang out in that, my kind of vision is that you walk in and you look in that space and there's couches, there's places to hang out, there's free Wi-Fi, right? You're probably not going to hold a big board meeting there, understanding that you may be interrupted by kids or Brent coming in or just wanting to hang out and work, right? So if you wanted to come in and have it be exclusive, then of course you always pay for exclusivity. And so I don't think we would want a person to pay for exclusivity when we want this to be, if it truly is a community hub or a community building, people should be able to walk in freely at any point in time and enjoy it.
If I can follow up again with another question I had, and it was really related to not being at all the meetings, but understanding the community hub idea, which I think is a great idea and whatnot. But I was thinking of office space upstairs or whatever and noise. I'm thinking of when they're building upstairs here for stages and whatnot, and you're down here and bang, bang, the noise could be an issue.
Well, again, I don't think, it's not going to be, theaters have a certain amount of noise. Like, granted, there's a chair, they're building sets, they're doing all those kind of things, it's noisy, right? I think this is more as space where people can come, right? So it's kind of, you're gonna have small groups talking. Again, it's gonna be a newly refurbished building. So it's going to have, it's gonna be built for proper sound and things. It's not gonna be designed so that, if somebody's talking on the main floor and you're in an office upstairs, that, you'll be able to hear them. And I think it is just, I was at a lecture a couple weeks ago at Metropolitan University in their creativity space. And they've got a large open concept area where they had a meeting, but it's just ringed with individual offices, right? So I think that, and go to Snapping Turtle, go to Tim Hortons, and so many people, I still have a problem doing that, but so many people are able to work in, working when there's like all kinds of noise around them. So I think we're living in a much more, stuff is coming at us all the time, right? So we're not going to design it that way so that you're working in the middle of a big community space. But I think that the community use is not going to be that kind of loud, noisy community use. And I think people are just going to have to know if you're booking a meeting or if a municipal office goes in there, you're going to know that you're also in a public building, right? You're not in just an office building. So the people that are going to want to study in there are going to know that there could be kids in a makerspace, or there could be, people having a small, like a early on program downstairs. So it's not going to be 100% soundproof, but I think it's going to be designed so that these uses can coexist.
One other question I did have, because I don't believe there's any exits from the basement. So we do have the elevator, and I know that the Friends of the Library for book storage and everything else need all kinds of space and whatnot. So in discussions with the library and whatnot, being downstairs, was that adequate for them because of the elevator and putting on trolleys to get upstairs to get the book sales, et cetera? Is that?
Yeah, so in talking to Mary, and I talked to a couple of friends of the library members when I was over there, that working in the basement is fine. Right now, they are literally carting stuff upstairs. This will have an elevator that goes all the way to the basement level. It's going to be an elevator that's designed for heavy loads. It's not going to be just a lift that, can't carry much. It's going to be a proper commercial elevator that can have books and trolleys and stuff go into it. And then there also are the 2 staircases. So there's going to be 2 staircases going into the basement as well. So you've got the same amount of egress from the basement as you have everywhere else. And you're just going up the 1 flight 2 doors, right? So, they do have, again, it depends where the elevator actually gets placed. Right now, it's sort of in the center of the building. So, they could, they do have to take a trolley, like a cart or something, and go out the front door, but it's still 100% better than what they have right now, right? But yeah, no, they're excited about having, the basement's fine, they're excited about having dry space that they can work in.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions that come to my mind, and again, I'm trying to stay very high level. Operating and capital costs are at front of my mind right now in looking at this. And then as I look through our needs, I put, I'm writing down our needs and I'm putting question mark beside them. Like, we now have a gallery piece in this. We've just had a presentation on the gallery. We really have no idea where that's going. So that puts a question mark in my head. Adult learning, we've tucked space away upstairs for them. I don't know enough about it, but I don't know what the feasibility of that program is in the future, how that goes forward, what that looks like. My next question mark is library. We've got a sizable budget for the library, and I'm struggling getting my head wrapped around the fact that we're going to increase their space and their opportunities, but we're not going to increase manpower, budget size, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really struggling. I love the idea of the community hub. I think that's great. I think we've gone to a really good spot, but in my head, I have a lot of question marks that if we start forging down this road and all of a sudden Duncan says, you know what, I don't think I can do this. So now we have a gallery that needs to be repurposed. We lose our funding for adult learning. That goes sideways. We come with a budget that has a $200,000 increase because we have 2 FTEs because they have to manage an upstairs and a downstairs over there. So again, it's very high level, and I don't know if this is the place for that or the discussion we need to have, but in my head, it's like, how do we operate this without putting a huge tax burden on our ratepayers?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges I know that I always had with this project is I usually don't have a very difficult time having a vision for the future, or seeing where I wanted to go with something. I think we have to be truthful with ourselves that we bought 14 Church Street without really knowing what we were going to do with it, without having ourselves as a town a defined space need at that point in time. We bought it because it was probably the only opportunity we were going to have to buy it and then have this nice close proximity. So in part, some of this project right now is to look at space needs we think we have today, and we know we have today, and then projecting into the future, right? And it is very, very difficult because we don't know. The adult learning is a good example. Having worked in the upstairs of the library, I will advocate for those staff to say that is not a long-term solution for those staff. To work in a space where there is no natural light and it is not the most hospitable environment to work in. I think of myself to be have good mental strength and resolution, but even I cracked up there after about 6 months because it's just a difficult place to work. So on one hand, I do support moving them over here. But if funding's pulled, the idea is that maybe you don't need that space today, but again, at least now we have it because we know this is also a strategic project for growth into the future, that our community is going to grow, our staff complement is going to grow, we are going to change. In 20 years, maybe that building truly is just one floor community space, one floor just an administration office. I can't project that into the future. In terms of the library, I think this, when you look at, they had a space needs analysis in 2017. We can probably debate for a long time on whether or not we agree with all of the recommendations that the consultant made. But what they did show is on a per capita basis, 10,500 square feet is what they need in a 20-year planning period with our community growth. And even doing it through our own process and getting it down to the needs of the needs, they showed that they needed 2,700 square feet. I think the vision that this project brings forward is that the library will truly stay a place where collections remain. And then if that means that they need to expand their collections or change their shelving to meet accessibility needs, they can use that space, and then at least they can do programming over here. If the library and the library board then choose, once they have space, to start increasing their service level, as council, you will see that through their budget submissions every year, and that's truly your one opportunity to say, no, we don't agree. We didn't build this space for you to increase your service level. We built this space for you to match the service level that you have today, continue to provide it, and maybe increase it a little bit in terms of having a proper maker space and things like that. So I'm again not going to be shy to admit that yes, this is going to come with significant capital cost. It's not, we're already $1.5 million into this job. To think that it's going to take $3 to $4 more million is not outside the realm of possibility. I think for any of us, I think that's very realistic when you're looking at 3,500 square feet per floor. And then in terms of operating costs, yes, it will add new operating costs to us because it's a new building. I'm hoping in those initial years, like I said, through very good scheduling, we're going to have very good scheduling anyways, just to make sure these multi-purpose space, there's no conflicts, and that people accept the idea that it will just be staffed with our current complement as best we can, so that when early on's in there, it's the early on staff for responsibility for the building, and then when they transition it to the libraries for their program, it's now theirs. But that's my vision, and I know there are conflicting visions out there. I know there are visions that once this happens, service levels can grow, staff can be added, and those will be difficult conversations you have to have at budget time every year, I think. And I know that doesn't perfectly answer your question. 5 James Street, again, this whole project was supposed to result in a vision for 5 James Street as well. We haven't really even turned our minds to it yet, because as long as the gallery exists there's no other use for it. But if the gallery ever does close, we are supposed to go through the same process with 5 James Street and decide what we use the train station for, if anything at all.
I mean, I think the only thing I can add to that is that I think in all the discussions to date and the list of spaces that we've come up with are designed so that everything is multi-purpose. So like the gallery could be another meeting room. It could be a community space. It could be, it's a box basically, right? That as long as it, when we're at the actual design stage, if we know it's a gallery, we need to make sure it's got proper lighting and proper, walls and things that you can hang things on. But basically it's a box, so it could be used for anything. Adult learning, same thing. If they decide, if you don't get the contract or whatever and they're not here, you can use that for some other meeting room, a larger office, whatever. So I think everything that we've come up with to date, or all the discussions to date, we've gone around this a lot, is everything can be multi-purpose. Like one of the things that came up in discussion was having a small black box type theater space. So another small theater space in town for, smaller music things, smaller productions, smaller theater. Well, you could technically have the gallery, if you have a theater lighting grid instead of track lighting, the gallery could also function as that space, right? So I think that when we start getting more into, if we're happy with the general notion of what this space needs are right now, what we label them for down the road could change, right? As long as we're sort of going, okay, we want, say, the 650 square foot gallery space. That's a nice size space. It could be a medium-sized meeting room. It could be a small theater. It could be you know, any number of things. But we want a space that big. We want a box that's sort of mostly closed in. We want a big open concept space that we can have as a gathering space. We can have a large meeting space. We can have an event space. We can have whatever. What we're actually going to do in there, we don't need to know exactly right now. It's more, are these generally the space sizes we want? And then as we get through the next concept and design stages and look at programming in more detail, we can sort of figure out that exactly what they're used for. But I think in all the discussions, both at the committee level and the staff level, we're trying to make it as functional and flexible and multi-purpose as possible. Because yes, I mean, this is a long process, right? And it's an expensive process, right? And also make it so that we don't have to operate the building with, you know, 5 full-time staff. You know, I think the idea is that, you know, you'd have one person, I think buildings said that they would like to have a half-time maintenance custodial person kind of assigned to the building, and then probably like one person that's always on site, right? And then programming. But I mean, as Brent said, you could also have that one person on site be allocated to any number of programs, with the exception of adult learning, because when they are there, they're working with a client. They can't be also managing a building, but almost any other staff position could be flexible and operate the building. And in my lengthy conversations with Sarah, you know, it's basically taking programming that is cramped where they are and moving it over there. So it's not really extra staff. It's just kind of, instead of the early on person trying to have a program in amongst the stacks, they now have a nice big space. Or, you know, a lecture or something, instead of it being there, it's now here. So that's not really adding extra staff. It's, you know, just allocating it differently. And then, I mean, galleries often have volunteers that sit at the desk and monitor it. So again, depending how it's structured, you know, that could be, if you've got public space, you know, there are people that do volunteer. So, you know, not that you should be relying on volunteers to staff municipal buildings, but there is that flexibility, right? So I think yes, I mean, you're adding a new building. It's going to cost more. But I think that the way the discussions have gone so far and the way we've kind of allocated space is that it's to make it as usable and flexible as possible and to not add a lot of human resource costs.
And I thought I would just add is the Adult Learning Center subcommittee hasn't really met for, I think, around a year, but we do meet tomorrow again. So I will bring some of those concerns forward and see if we can get kind of a touch point for council going with regards to information sustainability and that sort of thing. So, Councillor Luna.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You mentioned a lunchroom for the basement. I'm not seeing it on the plan, but I'm just wondering, in addition to that, a washroom down there. Wouldn't you need a washroom in the basement? I'm just thinking you're going to be putting plumbing in soon, I would imagine, and shouldn't there be a washroom down there if there's going to be a staff room?
I think by code you don't have to have it, because, I mean, it's not something that they're going to be using for hours on end, and there's enough other restrooms that are available per code in the building. So it's not a must-have, but it's something we can definitely put on the list for consideration as we move forward. I mean, it's a good point.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A question that I would like to get answered, because I'm not really sure what, I see the early on program running very frequently when I'm in at the PRC, and I was under the impression that periodically they do go to the library just for a different venue to see if they attract different people. So it's not like the early on is there all the time.
No, they're not there all the time, but there are certain programs that they do at the library because they're more reading, humanities-based as opposed to active, physical-based at the PRC. So I think, and you know, those programs do, early on type programs seem to grow based on space available and programs they're offering too, right? So I think, no, they're not there every day, but they do have a very active program at the library, which is much more literary, humanities-based.
Thank you. I just, the staffing complement and the expense involved is also a concern for me. And I look at all the bookings will be done through the town central booking system using guest services, it says here. And why wouldn't that be a good location for 14 Church? Is that a consideration to move some full-time staff so the building does have at least an extra person or two there at all times, at least through the day or maybe while it's open? Because if you do bring a program over, when you say no more complement of staff for the library, you're having one person run a program over there, but they've got other people in the building there to support them in case something should happen. And if you take one person over there with a group of people and it's one person in the building, that would be a concern.
And I think Angela just said it, I think perfectly. We probably do need one person to sit at that reception/tourism/info spot almost all the time through the day. How we do that, we have not sorted out yet, but it could be exactly through that. We always need a guest services person at the PRC for sure, just given how busy they are, especially when the pool's back open all the time. But how we fill that, again, we haven't fully sorted it out, but again, to Angela's point, we want to be as creative as possible, especially in those, let's talk about the initial 1 to 2 to 3 years after if this building was renovated and open and operated, to keep our staff complement to as low as possible and our HR costs as low as possible. Because I think that, I guess the best way I'm thinking of it in my head is that at some point in time, we probably will be paying a premium and slightly more than we need on human resources to operate this building. And then just naturally through growth, we'll finally hit that right spot and start paying exactly what we need to pay, and the cost should be normal. So it's, again, I do apologize. It's very difficult to project that far in the future for us because there are so many things. There's going to be so many things that change even from today to the point where we go and issue a design tender for this thing, right? The whole concept may have changed if something crazy happens in the next 3 years, right? But that's, again, we're just trying to work with philosophies and assumptions, and that assumption is when we open, we want to operate it correctly. We've learned some lessons in the past about not having enough staff to run a building, like at the PRC when it was opened. But we want to do it as cost efficiently as possible is the goal.
Thank you. So it has here the teen collection, it has a 0 by that. Being on the library board, and through our discussions with the Downtown Service Committee, there continued to be advocation for some resources, whether it be a movable and changeable display. Teen seemed to be the focus, or youth, to bring them in and have, pick up a magazine or a newspaper, whatever that is, made available in that open space. Also, I was at the meeting and I was then taken downstairs to look at the display board where they have all of their the free activities, where you can go get a park pass or a quarry pass or snowshoes or whatever, pickleball paddles, and pick them up. And there's just this board with all these little things that you just take and you take to reception and you walk away with them. And, they would ask, is that something that could go over there? And I don't know the answer, but I know that right now it's a 0 allocation for any sort of display or service that the library has other than programming. And so that might be something that is needed.
So I think, again, in talking to Sarah, is that would be sort of built into the bigger space. So rather than sort of allocating, 50, 100, 200 square feet to that, it would sort of be built into that space. We also have the potential of that, market, gift shop, tourism, whatever space that is, to use that as, a little alcove where things could happen, right? Like we're not sort of, it's not like it's like we have to have a shop there. It's sort of more that this is a space that has those kind of potentials, right? And I think there's also, there's being desire at numerous levels of people I've spoken to about having someplace where you can get tourist information. So it's that same kind of, thing, like, is there a central, where is that? So I think the idea, if you've got the central reception desk, and then you've got 1,000+ square feet of open space, that might be more depending on how it's initially or finally configured, that you can build in display things or movable things, rather than saying we need a, 150 square foot room for that, right? So it's not forgotten, like it's on the still list, it just doesn't have dedicated space, but again, that's why we're here, right? So if that's something that council feels is important, is having dedicated, collection, whatever space for the library, then that's something that, this is the time to voice that and get it on the list again, right?
Further to that, at the meeting, there was, again, brought up the space and needs study that was done by the library, and my concern is that we create the space for their use, and there doesn't seem to be a buy-in. Maybe it's just at the board level, or maybe it's within the CAO of the library, that will suffice, that we're not satisfying the need for that extra space. Somehow this is a temporary solution, and that an addition to the library would still be needed and still be a push. And I'd like to know that the board of the library supports the fact that we're investing, and then that would be, we would table the space and needs study that was done and say, okay, we've satisfied that, and it's not continuing to be a push forward. And if that means that we have to allocate some wall space and some portable, little, interchangeable for a certain use segment that might draw people in, then maybe those things should be mentioned instead of at a zero, and maybe the discussion should include the library board to see that we can get that, confirmation that we're not going to continually have a push forward for the fulfillment of the space and needs study that we're trying to do now.
And I guess I'll start with this from a governor's perspective. So I think back to what Angela was saying, we don't, as conceived today, there will not be dedicated stacks over at 14 Church Street. And so if you bless this, I think at that point in time, you're essentially sending a signal and a message to the library that, that space is for programming, that space is for open community use and public use. The library board then needs to sort out how they use their space here at 15 Church Street, and that needs to be the place for the collection. I'm not certain you'll ever have the library board buy off on abandoning their idea of their original space needs. But I guess what I can share with you, just from my knowledge, is that it came forward in 2017. The report was never formally adopted, even at the council level. At that point in time, it said per capita we need around 10,500 square feet in a 20-year planning period total. So when you deduct that from what exists over there, it probably netted out at a need of around 4,000 to 5,000 more square feet. Through this, what you're offering to the library is the opportunity to have access to the 2,700 square feet, at least 2,700 square feet that they'd asked for in a 10-year planning period. So I think you are checking off some of the box, and then we reduce them down to needing 2,000 square feet. What is going to happen through this, so is if this concept is to come to full fruition, all of a sudden the upstairs of the library is now vacant. And from what I understand is at the board level, the two of you that sit on the board, you've had no conversation about how you're going to use the upstairs. And even internally when we've talked about it, I know Sarah hasn't really fully turned her mind to how they use the upstairs. The upstairs has challenges, but again, from a corporate perspective, we've taken the stance that it is public accessible space and it is okay for general public assembly. So it's usable space. As this project progresses, the library also itself needs to revisit its own space needs conversations to say, okay, we're going to get access to space over there. It's going to solve some of our programming needs. It's definitely going to solve the makerspace needs. It's going to solve an adult learning space needs. Now we have to sort out what we do with our collection and how to make it accessible. And I think when we were in Cambridge, we saw how they were doing it, right? They were just simply removing things from the upper shelves and making the lower shelves where they put everything. So they'll have to make a decision whether, again, how that occurs over in the library and whether they use some of the space that there is open space there. Let's not deny that. It's being used for programming today, especially downstairs. So we will free up space in the library now for collection, and then we will free up space upstairs. I think the library board you know, councillors, you will have to go there in your role as library board members and advocate for now pushing that narrative. Okay, now once this happens and we free up this space and we shift things around, how do we use our own space? What I'm hoping is happening though is we have a library board member on our downtown service location review committee. You know, I've always worked with the assumption that that person is coming to the table representing the voice of the library board. They may not always get their way because there are there are 7 people on that committee, 5 members of the public and 2 councillors, and we're doing our best to you know, put this jigsaw puzzle together to make it as, you know, fit our needs as a community, our needs corporately, and their needs as well. But I think through the process we've heard their needs, and I think we've heard what they want, and I truly believe that this building fits that need. But I know if the mayor was here, he would probably say in a slightly different way than I would say it now, but I'm not certain that the library board will abandon their space needs study from 2017, because there are still people on the library board who were part of that process and truly believe in it, and that's their right. They have their right to believe in that need and to advocate for that need. But what I would share to council is I think you're doing a really good job here of trying to address some of their needs.
I guess to supplement that as well, from my perspective as a library board member, I think that what we have here easily offsets and really assists the library in the challenges they're having. Like, since I've been on the board, we talked about the crazy wet basement and the fact it didn't have a lift. So those two issues are solved. Their programming space is essentially just that little, you know, central sort of area there, and they'll have bananas more than enough across the street. I feel like there's a point where you can only really ask for so much in reality, to quote the man whose chair this belongs to. So I think it's sufficient, to be honest. I think that despite the fact there will always be push for more space or more something, the library board operates in that way in support of and in passion for the library. But at this level, I think that what we've done is incredible. So.
I think we have to remember that this building is only, you know, we're talking about 7,000 square feet, really, of usable space, and a lot of things that we're trying to put in it. And I think that's the challenge that in all these conversations we keep going round and round on is, you know, how do you satisfy everybody? And I think that I love libraries, and I've got friends who are librarians, and I, you know, have come to know Sarah really well, and, you know, I think libraries should have as much space as they need, right? Because I think libraries are incredibly important, and they're one of our last free public spaces. But I think that, you know, in working with what we have here, we've created a lot of, everyone that's been involved has created a lot of open, multi-purpose space that can be used for programming. And, you know, just because we're labeling something a gallery doesn't mean that you can't have a kid's story time in there, right? It doesn't mean just because there's a maker space, you know, studio space, it doesn't mean that there can't be, you know, some kids' bookbinding class. Like, I mean, I think that there's a lot of, what I've gathered from working with all of you in this community over the last couple months is that we've created this space that's got a lot of flexibility, and it's how we sort of imagine it when it actually comes to fruition. And so I think for now, it's really kind of just, do we have the right kind of complement of spaces that we can figure out exactly how they're going to be used down the road, with the understanding that we don't want to make a lot of changes once the architects start working on this, because every change they make costs money. But, you know, can we get to a point where we can give this list to them so that they can start looking at some concepts, in which case we can still come back and go, oh, no, like, the library actually needs a space to look like this or feel like this, and what you've designed isn't going to work, right? So we still have that option. We're not at a stage now where it's sort of like, these are written in stone. We're still at a very open, we're just looking at square footage and how we might use spaces, and we can still decide how that's going to look, feel, be used in any number of stages along the way. What we just want to avoid is telling them that, yes, we want a large open concept space of 1,000 square feet and a gallery / whatever it's going to be, a 600 square feet on the main floor, and, you know, a little servery, and we need storage, and then we go, oh no, actually what we wanted was 4 tiny spaces, right? We don't want to do that, but if how we use the space or tweaking a little bit of it is still an open option in the next stage. It's just kind of, have we got the right mix of spaces that you think we're going to need over the next, 10-something years that are flexible enough? And are we kind of aligning the right kind of uses to them? Or are we missing something drastic? Or do we want to add something? Or is our space configurations all wrong? Or some combination of the above? So that we can sort of start getting to what is actually the more kind of exciting stage of this, is when we actually are designing the space and we can start looking at, we can start envisioning what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel when people are making it come alive.
All right, gang. We should probably start to nail this down, eh? So let's maybe lock in on the list we got here. And you guys, so like, are we willing to pass the list as is? That's really the central question. Are there things you guys would strike from it, considerations? Councillor Luna, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess it's a minor edit with the staff room in the basement and a possibility of a washroom. I don't know what a washroom costs, but if it's feasible to put a washroom down there, that's the only thing I would have at this point, I think.
Councillor Edney?
I just one small thing, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to say it anyway. But on the second floor, there's 2 small meeting rooms. Is that correct in the drawing that I see? And it doesn't make sense to me to break up that one big room. It should really be one big room that can be divided in 2. That's about the only thing I would, because then you still have 2 meeting rooms, the same sizes. Do you see what I'm saying yeah, right there.
Oh, that little one.
Yeah, and so you got these 2 here. Is there some way to not have 2 separate meeting rooms? This is what I'm talking about. In the middle of this big, nice meeting room, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to throw a block in there. Yeah.
But I think also the idea was... No, I think, sorry, that's a good point. In the discussions, which, isn't indicated here, is that as many of these meeting rooms would have glass walls to let natural light in. So it could, we could take it out. It could be one of those sort of things that's got a divider around it where whoever's kind of monitoring the makerspace kind of has this sort of workstation. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that we can... they just stuck that in there in our last iteration. Originally, the first version of this had the makerspace a bit smaller, and that meeting room was actually part of the hallway. And we said that we wanted less hallway, so they kind of, for argument's purpose, just dumped it into the makerspace. But again, that's really good to know. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. May not be exactly the rooms that my friend here is talking about, Councillor Edney, but I think it's real important to have some very tiny individual rooms for future. And I'm only thinking of our current worker with the vulnerable sector and whatnot, and space for them, and sometimes just being able to get them on a laptop to do whatever, because there's so much now. Even court is on Zoom at times. You know what I'm saying? So I do believe that some of these little individual rooms with doors, be nice if we had one today, but I can see it down the road where it's going to be a real necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's come clear in all levels of this discussion and that's why we've got, how many sort of small spaces indicated here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms that are like 100 square feet or less for that purpose. It doesn't show up on this diagram or the drawing just because it's just to give you an idea of space, but on the list we actually have 5 small little rooms that could be used for, meetings, offices, whatever. Yeah.
Sightlines are really super important in these spaces for the staff, and I'm just looking at the meeting room spaces, and if that's where the staff that are monitoring these places will be situated, then it would need to be glass very visible so that they can see what's going on. And if not, then their space is right in the midst of the whole makerspace. Makerspaces need a specific type of staff, don't they, to know all of the equipment and how to run it. So if that space is open while this building is open, then that would need to be a staff person, I would expect. The architect came through, you had mentioned like last week, and what was the discussion around 2 stairways? Because it still bothers me, like we've got 2 stairways and they're less than 30 feet apart. I just think that's overkill, but yeah.
So you need to have 2 staircases, because we asked about that. And we asked about moving the staircase more centrally so that you'd have more of like a entry, grand staircase, elevator kind of deal. Ideally, you've only got 2 exits. We've got 3 possible exits to the building. The main entrance, you've got the door on this side, and you've got another, right now, sort of temporary door at the back where the back staircase is. So your staircases have to go to the exits. I'm not a building planning person, so if I'm getting this wrong, I apologize. But the way I understand it, you have to have the 2 staircases, you have to have the elevator. Or we don't have to have the elevator, but we want the elevator to make it accessible. And then we have to have the 2 exits. We could potentially make the front staircase swing so it's kind of vertically against that wall instead of horizontally. Again, those are things that it was really helpful for him to come to the building. He hadn't been to the building since before deconstruction started. So to see where girders are, where things are, will change the way he kind of configures the space. Again, Brett and I asked him to do these drawings just so that for people that don't sort of have an idea of like, what does 600 square feet look like in 3,500 square feet? You've got something visual that you can sort of get an idea of how much volume things take up. Yeah, the staircases are tough based on the doors. Yeah. And also you have to have, as far as I understand, you have to have so many feet between where somebody's going to be and where the exit door is in an emergency, and how they're going to get there, which is why you need corridors and you can't go through other spaces. And there's all sorts of building, code, planning, architectural, structural engineering things that I am not that person. But yeah, we definitely said that we want as much light coming through, and having a staircase right where windows are going to be is not desirable. But how that actually gets resolved is probably going to happen at the design stage, but we've definitely communicated that we don't like the placement of where he's put the stairs in the drawing, and if there's another location for that, that would be ideal. The problem with putting it more central is that you're going to lose other space, right? Because now you've got to have, well, you could potentially use the main door as, you need 2 exits, right, from the building. So you could use the main door as one of those exits and then have the secondary exit at the back. That is a potential, but then it's how you design the space for having a central staircase. And then there's also, the way I understand it, if you're using that as your secondary exit and it's open concept, then that's not, that you can't do that. Then it's not that same kind of secure, safe exit point that the secondary closed-in exit is, right?
So, okay, it's a frustration for me because I see one here, and even if you change the width, you've got 2 exits within, 15 feet of each other. I'm like, oh my gosh. But anyway, okay, I guess that's something that you can't avoid, that extra use of space.
Yeah, it's where the doors are, and if there was a door, I mean, right now you've got another building on the south side. You're right at the property line at the back. There's a whole bunch of things that are like physical constraints of this building as to where it's situated, and the fact that it's a historic building. I mean, if this was a brand new build and it was not bordered by 2 properties on both sides, maybe you'd have more flexibility. It's like how you do the best thing. But again, sort of don't get hung up on this is where the staircase is exactly like this right now, because we could find ways to maybe, I mean, he's very aware of the fact that we don't like where the staircase is. But we've got, you know, certain issues in how we resolve that. But yeah, that is definitely a noted issue.
Excellent. So, does anybody have any other questions or comments before we look to put the motion on the floor here? Councillor Craigmile.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Brent, can you just explain these motions to us a little bit before we get started? Because I'm really thinking of, because we're at this high-level concept, if we're agreeing with most of that, what I'm thinking of is that the architect will get going on it, and then he'll be coming back, like I remember we did through the fire hall, and he'll have this question, that question, and each one has a financial impact. Yeah. And who is best to be involved in that?
Yeah, sure. So the way I've structured the resolution is that because we're in strategic priorities, there's no specific recommendation. It's kind of an either or an or. If you go down the, Jen, I don't have it in front of me, but if you go down the first version that, you know, the council, essentially, if you pass the first one, you're communicating to us that you're comfortable with this vision for this building, that it's going to be a community cultural hub. The first floor is going to be really community space. The second floor is going to be a good mix of community space, but then space where that agencies come in and use it as well. That you're comfortable with the space needs analysis that we've done here, and then you'll just be listing the few little things, like either design elements or slight changes to the buildings or things that are important to you that we'll then communicate into the architect. If that happens, the next phase of the project is really the architectural phase, where the architect will probably use these concepts as a decent start because we've all now looked at them and given him design feedback on it. He'll start designing. He has to design up to 2 concepts for us to have debate over. The first review will happen at the staff level, so this whole project is kind of worked at the staff level first. We try and do as much work as we can to make the conversation for the committee simple, and the committee does as much work as they can to make council's conversations simple. So we're all very aware that we want to do this work as cost effectively as possible. So a lot of the heavy lifting would fall on both our CBO and Grant, and then the building inspector and Jason to take a good look at the design elements, the concept, and come back with Jason and Grant have a really good way of looking at a building and then thinking about how it flows and operates and give it comments back that way to say, it's not going to work this or that's not going to work there. All that heavy lifting will happen at staff level. And if we get to the point where we're comfortable with it and we think that we have given as cost efficient a design and as efficient of an operating building as we have, then we would come to committee. And the idea would be is that the architect would attend that committee meeting. He could make that presentation. The building staff would be there as well, along with Angela, and we present it to committee level. And if committee is generally happy with it, then we will make whatever edits are made there and then bring the final package back to council so you can see what we'd say is final conceptual designs with a Class D construction estimate, which is, I think Class D is plus or minus 25%, so big swing, but at least gives you an idea of the order of costs. And then we'd be asking council kind of that same question. Are you happy with the concepts that we've provided? Are there any changes? And then we would then make those changes and put the nice little final bow on the project. So that's really what these resolutions are. So that's the path forward with resolution number 1. If you've looked at all of this and heard our conversation and our answers to your questions and you're not comfortable with how it's going forward, then you would just simply refer the whole thing back to us and we would just need really clear direction with what part of the vision you're not happy with, how you'd like to see it re-envisioned, and then we'll kind of go back and we would not restart the committee process, but we go back to the staff level, make whatever changes we need to make, go to the committee and have them understand that and then make a recommendation to council. So based on what I've heard so far, I think you're more leaning to the first portion of the, interesting, more to the first portion of the resolution. And I guess I'm going to stop rambling now.
Councillor Luna.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It would be the addition of a staff room in the basement too. It's not on the plan, as it's been mentioned, but it's not on the plan.
and again, we can get kind of liberal and Phillies in afterwards, but what I'd written down was, you know, in the makerspace, that small, breaking up the makerspace, I wrote it down as it's kind of weird, so we're gonna make sure that we're not gonna do that, or just at least rejig it in such a way that having that meeting study space would fit more naturally in the space, making sure that we prioritize. We believe we have, again, just going back to make sure we prioritize lots of small spaces for individuals to meet, but again, those in the future that they have that dual purpose of being office space for staff, ensuring clear sight lines for staff for monitoring spaces. And again, we'll put on the list again that second stair, we have to find a creative way to locate it in the building.
Councilor Pridham?
Thank you. I mentioned the library and their need for, interchangeable display and or some wall space. I know that it's been mentioned for storage and all kinds of things within this, but I don't see that it's mentioned, and I don't want it to be overlooked.
Councilor Lucas, following that?
It's not so much a comment, it's gonna come back to my original point. I really think when we come back with our proposals, I think we need more of a concrete analysis of operation of this building. I think the two go hand in hand. Before I'm fine to send this to council to say, yes, let's move forward. I think we need a clear understanding of what library's thoughts are, and just how we're gonna operate this building. I'm still in a struggle with this. I think it's great. I love what we've proposed, and I like the idea, but from an operational standpoint, I'm still really struggling. I've heard that we won't need additional staff. Well, we may need additional staff. So let's put together something realistic that as a council we can make an accurate decision on, please.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? Councilor Craigmile.
Thank you. One of the things just during our discussion, from the architect, like timelines would be, so we'd have an idea of, where do costs go up 25% if you just do one floor to, you have to do this as a bare bones minimum, but you can do first floor, the second floor. These are the type of questions that will be important to council. Just going after what Councilor Lucas was saying about the funds are limited, and it's a matter of
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. All right, any further questions or discussion before we just put the motion on the floor as is with our amendments? Okay, are we clear on the motion? Okay, thank you.
o'clock, but I just told Leslie I might have to get her to move it still.
What you could have, wonder what you could have built a building for.
I know. I said the same thing. That was the first thing 7 years ago. I said to Brent, was I wanted that building, and now I'm like, when I walked in there and saw the shell, I'm like,
Okay, so I'll just read the motion as is, and we'll see how everybody feels about it. So the recommended motion is that admin 10-2025 downtown service location review space needs analysis recommendations for 14 Church Street report be received, and that the Strategic Priorities Committee recommends to Council that the space needs assessment for 14 Church Street be adopted with the following minor edits: addition of staff room and washroom in basement, maintain as much natural light as possible by removing walls, although some rooms with privacy are necessary, makerspace redesign location of small study to improve flow, ensure clear sight lines for staff who are monitoring the space, ensure sufficient small spaces in individual meeting rooms, consideration for including temporary and interchangeable space for displaying library materials, consideration be given to move staircase, and that when the draft concept design is returned to Council for consideration, that a concept operational plan is presented, and that staff determine if construction may be phased and what total construction cost would be. Okay, that's right. Okay, so with that, I will ask, is anybody willing to put this motion on the floor? Councillor Luna. Second? Councillor Lucas. Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Edney?
it's that one word thing. The last one, if the word estimate could be thrown in there. We aren't gonna know the exact amount. I just think the word estimate should appear in that last. What the estimated total construction cost would be. And we know that. We know that's what it's gonna be, but the wording, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 5.2, admin 10-2020, oh, wrong, sorry.
Just one quick question, I guess. Probably incumbent on me to ask if council has the time to consider our last agenda item, or if you have any commitments and would prefer to defer it till next Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll pull the table. How's everybody feeling? Do you got time for this, or? I think we can slam it.
That's council's prerogative, not mine, yes.
It was an easy move in my view. So we'll move on to 5.3, COR 15-2025, U.S. tariff information.
I will do my best. Changing gears 180 degrees here, but so the U.S. tariffs, so there's a couple of items that have happened recently. The city of Brampton has kind of put together a fairly comprehensive policy statement and kind of movement. And that's kind of what led to a little bit of this this report in front of you. Obviously, things are evolving and changing daily, if not more, on this topic. So our discussions internally to date have been, let's monitor, let's have a look at what's happening, and let's stay abreast of what's happening, but not take any drastic steps for a couple of reasons. Number one, things are evolving and changing quickly. Number two, this is a complicated issue in regards to how does this impact our community, our businesses, our country, all of those things, and it's very fluent. We have lots of businesses that rely on U.S. goods or U.S. supplies. We have lots of visitors that come in from the U.S. that really help with our tourism industry in the area, those type of things. And then on the flip side, again, there's certainly a strong movement to buy Canadian, support Canadian, but what does that all mean from a long-term perspective? So we've been kind of taking that stance throughout. Whether or not, but we haven't asked council that question yet, or we certainly haven't discussed it much at this level. There are municipalities starting to take different stances. You would have probably heard in the news over the last couple of days. The Mayor of Toronto is presenting something to their strategic committee tomorrow, I believe. Which is kind of a tariff response for the City of Toronto, which makes changes to some tax policy around industrial properties. That also talks about procurement changes with a Buy Canadian, or at least limiting what U.S. companies can bid on in their procurement. So we'll see where that goes. We haven't had a lot of information come through over the last little while from the AMOs of the world. Just again, that's the other piece. We've been kind of waiting on those advices. Procurement is a complicated thing, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in municipal procurement, but there are some challenges with strictly a Buy Canadian policy, and there's rules that we need to follow, not only with the agreement we have with Mexico and U.S. on trade agreements, but with all of the other trade agreements we have across the world. So, so with that said, the report in front of you, and I won't go through it but it attempts to kind of give you a little bit of a history of what's happened to date. And again, as of March 12th, some of these things have already changed a little bit. I've also kind of have an explanation of kind of what a tariff is, what it means, who pays it, those type of things, just to help as we go around the room, how this might impact a municipality. It's funny, some people you talk to is, well, it's got nothing to do with the municipality. And if you look at it from a fundamental point of view or a direct point of view, maybe not, but in a lot of other ways it does. It may affect our costs, it may affect our expenses, may affect our budgets, but more importantly, it may affect our community members, which then means, do we need to put supports in place? Do we need to deal with employment issues? Do we need to deal with business issues? Very much like the pandemic in a lot of ways. It's bringing all this unpredictability, and we have to be kind of ready to act, or we are the one that people look to act in that regard. So there is lots of impacts that we could be dealing with as we go forward. We have kind of met with our partners in Stratford and Perth County just to kind of keep abreast of what they're doing as well. Again, nothing drastic being done at this point in time. A lot of data collection and discussions as we go through. We have talked about it after the BIA meeting. We had some talks with our last BIA meeting, which is just some of the general businesses as well as what their take was. So again, same thing. There's a lot of apprehension of, yes, Buy Canadian, but then there's conversations with some of the businesses that I can't get my supplies anywhere else. So if people take that stance, then my business is going to hurt. The bookstore was a good example. If people don't buy only Canadian authors, I'm not sure if that's going to be a wise business decision for that type of business. So there's lots of really weird and complex issues when it comes down to this particular issue in general. But the idea of the report today is to give you some information of what we've seen and what we've heard thus far, give you an example of a resolution council can support, so that, again, you're doing something, you're supporting it, and then gives us the direction to come back with any further changes to any policies or procedures based on the discussion we hear today. And again, the most common one we're hearing is around the procurement side of things, of course. So, and that's why you see the resolution in front of you. We took that from, it's very close to a sample that we've seen a couple of other municipalities use based on the City of Brampton's kind of movement. So again, it just, in essence, provides that support, that provides council's support to what the federal and provincial governments have been doing, and then also directs staff to come back with a detailed report in regards to changes in temporary procurement. What those changes are is what the discussion here is today, and that change may be nothing. Maybe you want us to look at similar items to what the City of Toronto is looking at. or if there's any other topics for us to discuss. Again, some of the other things that municipalities are talking about is limiting a lot of the travel to the U.S. that staff would take, a lot of the day-to-day expenditures to the U.S. A lot of that stuff we're not necessarily participating in currently today, but there might be some of those type of things that we can consider as well in putting in something. So the purpose of today is I provided you as much information as I could, from a week and a half ago. Things are evolving and changing on a daily. We have no new information from AMO and our overarching people from that perspective. But again, City of Toronto recently is certainly making some news on what they're doing on their front. So it's an open discussion as ask us questions on what maybe we can do or can't do, and I'll try to answer those. And then what, if you want, in changes to this motion or resolution that you would like us to bring back to support kind of where council feels they want to go. So I'll open up the floor from there.
Councillor Luna.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So for me personally, I would like to see something that says that if we have two submissions for a piece of equipment, say one is totally U.S. made, one is Chinese made, that we have the option of buying the Chinese made product rather than the U.S., that we do an out-and-out boycott of the U.S. whenever possible. And I don't say this lightly because, well, we won't get into all that, but I just think we need to have, and my understanding is right now we don't have that choice. So I would like to see something that gives us that kind of choice. And I do have, sorry, one other thing, a change to the motion, if I could. In the therefore, the last line, take any and all measures to protect the interests of Ontario. I would change that to protect the interests of the provinces and Canada in any upcoming trade negotiations, would be my suggestion. It sounds kind of isolationist when you only mention Ontario.
Especially when we're trying to break barriers between provinces.
Exactly. Pardon? In the territories. Sorry, yes, of course.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Craigmile?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree with Councillor Luna. However, we really rely on our industrial tax base here in the town of St. Mary's. And I would like to hear back more or less the conversation you just had with us, Andre, from St. Mary's Cement Plant, Cascade, something like Intertech in particular, because I always get concerned if our name happens to get out there and somebody in some boardroom somewhere is making decisions about what plants are closing and what, you know what I mean? So I just want to make sure we cover all avenues. And I think it'd be very important for us to have a conversation with our industrial sector.
Through the mayor, yeah, we've attempted to kind of start some of those discussions. Certainly it hasn't been broad-based, and Kelly's been working a little bit on that. A couple of weeks ago, just starting to reach out to her contacts to find out what impacts, what thoughts were, what that process is. So we'll try to gather as much of that as possible and share as we're available to share, or at kind of the next reporting session on that front. And then if I may, just going back to the procurement policy. So yeah, so our procurement policy, like many, if not all, in at least Ontario municipalities, is very much where there's no protections for local or Canadian for that matter. It is either in a tender specific, it's low bid. In an RFP or other, it's best value for money, which that in some cases that value for money may be a little different depending on what our needs of that specific product or service is. And what I've seen being done in some other areas, at least to deal with this tariff issue, is twofold. Either the limits at which you go out for a public tender have been increased. So that then gives staff the authorities to purchase goods or services without going through a formal procurement process, which then the council provides the staff with the authority to do that, with the understanding that they will prioritize either local or Canadian. That's one way, as long as you don't go over certain limits that are in our international trade agreements. The other way, and I guess this is what Toronto is trying to do at this point in time, is to set the limits at a certain level, which again goes back to those international trade agreements that have thresholds to them. The two thresholds that Toronto's use is $353,000 on goods and services and $8.8 million on construction program. I see where they get the $8.8 million on international trade agreements. I do not see where the 353 comes from. So again, more digging needs to be done on that front. And what they've done there is they've excluded the U.S., or what they're trying to do, or what they're recommending to do, is exclude the U.S. from being able to bid on contracts under those values, is what I'm understanding. But again, I need to do a lot more research on that front. So going back to what Councillor Luna suggested, I would bring back a report that gives you those options based on what I understand and based on what council's wishes are on that front.
Councillor Luna.
Thank you. Question for the CAO, I guess. Are we restricted under the Municipal Act with our procurement, or is it our bylaws that say what we can do?
So through the Deputy Mayor, all the Municipal Act says is that you're required to have a procurement policy, but how you set your procurement policy and your limits is yours. But as Andre is referring to here, there are still international trade agreements that our policy has to comply with now. And that's really our challenge, is that we don't, I think getting to the root of it, we don't really, in the current legislative construct, we don't have the ability to limit who bids on our work. Like there was law changes in the last 3 years that basically says we have to allow anybody anywhere to bid on our work. And that's the issue that municipalities are facing right now. What they're advocating to the province about is that if you want, we'd like to all have a respond to this, and we'd all like the ability to buy Canadian or prefer Canadian companies. We don't have, legislatively, we're not allowed to do that right now. That's the issue. So I think what Andre's mentioned here is procurement limits is one way to kind of get around it. If we start saying, staff have the ability to now start going out there and sole source work up to this higher level, it gives us the ability to go knock on the local company's door rather than put it out for open bid.
And just further to that, and again, I agree with the way our procurement works, because it works both ways. And the idea of international trade agreements is we're not going to limit other nationalities and other national companies from bidding on certain work here. On the flip side, our Canadian companies can also bid on international goods and services and construction. So the point is, it's good for everyone. We're just in a kind of a desperate time, or a challenging time right now. And my view is this is temporary in nature. But again, as important as we see, but to Brent's point, that certainly is where the challenge is. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're also getting a lawsuit for not properly having a procurement policy that aligns with a trade agreement which may happen, and we don't have necessarily legal advice, and we haven't had the government. One of the things AMO is working on is getting the federal and provincial governments to give us the direction and legislation to be able to do these things. That has not yet occurred. Premier Ford has insinuated that something might happen, but we haven't seen anything at this point. But again, there's other maybe mechanisms we can use if council wants us to start at least down that path. There's other mechanisms that at least we're seeing other municipalities use, and we can kind of review and mimic if appropriate.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I appreciate the sentiment of what's going on. I think we have to be very cautious because we don't think we understand everything. And knee-jerk reactions to me, typically, if we look at the Premier of this province, we've bounced back and forth. The President down below has bounced back and forth. So again, I think we almost have to let the dust settle, if it could be. The part of my problem is with trying to exclude, like our truck, for example, that we just procured, our pickup truck, was made in the USA. We have no idea whether 90% of those parts were made in Canada and it was assembled in the USA. So I think again, I appreciate the sentiment, and I've definitely changed my buying habits, but I think we have to be really careful about delving into procurement policy based on whims of a nation next door at the moment. So I appreciate the information, but I think we really need to take a good look at what we're doing and not just do what everybody else is doing or have a knee-jerk reaction is kind of my thought.
If I could just add to that, so again, depending on where council or committee wants to go with this, and if there is a want and a need to change some procurement changes, the next big question is exactly that: what then defines a U.S. company or a U.S.? And that's where it does become a little bit challenging. What I've seen thus far, or at least what I've seen in what the news has reported for the City of Toronto, I haven't seen it in their documents, is they've defined a U.S. company as their headquarters being in the U.S. and 70% of their employees being in the U.S. But again, same thing, how do you determine those type of things? It becomes where things are challenging, as well as you may be dealing with a Canadian company, but if the parts or the supplies are coming from, again, where does that, and that certainly can be quite cumbersome. There's items then, if we did go down that path, then we would make revisions to our tender docs so that we ask those questions, so we get that information. Whether or not we can verify that is a different story, but at least there then becomes that part of the process. But we're here today just to kind of, again, I want to get a sense from council what your wishes look like, and then we bring back what those logistics might look like if you want to take certain steps.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree with Councillor Lucas. I think that the overall theme of these social media sites where buy Canadian, where you can and to the best of your knowledge, I think is and with the idea behind it of standing for Canada. And I don't think this is going to be something that we just do for the next maybe 4 years. I think this is the new way in Canada, that we're going to start understanding that we can't be dependent on, the U.S. or anybody else for our well-being. So I think it's just a question of, to the best of our knowledge and to the best of our ability, that we support Canada, would be my thought.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? So is it just the provinces and territories of Canada line that's an amendment to the motion, or is there? Okay. Okay. All right, well, I'll read the motion as it stands on the screen. So the recommended motion is that COR 15-2025 U.S. Tariff Information Report be received, and that the Strategic Priorities Committee recommends to Council that whereas the United States has announced its intent to impose tariffs on all Canadian goods destined for the U.S., and whereas these proposed tariffs threaten the stability of local industries and businesses and can severely impact our economy, workers, and trade relations with the U.S., and whereas the Town of St. Mary's is committed to protecting its local businesses, ensuring fair trade practices, and maintaining a competitive environment for all industries. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of St. Mary's supports Stand for Canada and the provincial and federal governments on the measures they've put in place in response to the proposed U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, and ask that they take any and all measures to protect the interests of the provinces, territories, and Canada in any upcoming trade negotiations. And that federal and provincial governments remove any impediments to municipalities preferring Canadian companies and services for capital projects and other supplies, and that the provincial and federal governments take action to remove trade barriers between provinces as a response to U.S. tariffs and support Canadian businesses, and that staff be directed to bring back a report detailing a temporary procurement policy that integrates and addresses these concerns, and that staff consult with local industry regarding their suggestions and strategies to respond to U.S. tariffs and report back to council. Somebody willing to move that motion? Sure. Question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So where will this go after we pass this at council?
Not to speak for Andre, but I think Andre would come back to you in a short while with a report on, probably an updated report on how things have changed so much in the next, say, 2 to 3 weeks is probably what's going to probably happen. But then also, like, let's hope that some of these ideas around procurement can mature, and he can give you an update on that. And then it sounds like either he or Kelly will have a conversation with industry and see what their responses are. Right? I think Councillor Craig Miles' suggestion is very wise there. That if some of our industries around town say we don't really support you taking action because of this, this, and this, I think council needs to be aware of that.
But I guess my question was, will it go to the Premier, the Prime Minister, the other province? That's what I'm saying, like a fan out to all municipalities?
Yes, so this, what really prompted this, like you have to forgive staff, like we are getting a lot of correspondence on this topic, and we're not like other municipalities where we bring every single, many municipalities, especially small ones, especially in Eastern Canada, really love passing resolutions that go to the Premier and all municipalities in Ontario. So you get flooded with that. In some municipalities, if you ever look at the County of Perth's agenda, they list every single one on a consent agenda. We're not bringing you all of those, but the one from Brampton was slightly different and was a slightly different movement that we thought really fit with what council was talking about and what you've had like on your sidebars. So we will add our logo to the standard letter that goes for the Stand for Canada, and then it'll be issued to, again, the Prime Minister, the Premier, and then we'll continue to be part of all the conversations with AMO and understand what they're recommending as well.
Okay, is somebody willing to move the motion as it stands? Councillor Luna, second. Councillor Pridham. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? Carried. Our next meeting is April 22nd, 2025 at 9 a.m. Town Hall, Council Chambers. Any other meetings people want to bring up? No? Awesome. 7, adjournment. It's the recommendation that this meeting of the Strategic Priorities Committee be adjourned at, what time we got? 12:51 p.m. Somebody willing to move that motion? Councillor Luna.